The land of Greece lay beneath a sky that seemed endless, a vast dome of soft blue that carried with it the quiet memory of ages long gone. Hills rolled gently, their slopes covered in olive trees whose twisted trunks had grown old watching centuries pass. Between the hills and valleys, scattered among grass and stone, were the remains of temples, structures that once stood tall, proud, and alive with prayer. Now they were silent, sleeping beneath the weight of time, their columns broken but not forgotten, their stones warmed by the same sun that once shone on worshippers who had long since vanished. In the stillness of the present, these temples seemed less like ruins and more like guardians of memory. Each column, each carved stone, whispered of a world where gods walked among mortals, where prayers rose like smoke to the heavens, and where faith shaped stone into beauty. But now, the gods no longer spoke, the priests no longer chanted, and the footsteps of pilgrims had faded into the dust. Only silence remained, deep and unbroken, as though the temples themselves had closed their eyes and drifted into a dream. The stones had not forgotten their purpose. Even in sleep, they carried the weight of devotion, the breath of prayers, the echo of hymns sung in the language of the ancients. Travelers who wandered close often felt something they could not name. It was not sound, not touch, but a kind of presence, as if the air itself remembered. Some would stop, placing a hand against the cool marble, and feel within its veins a faint hum, a memory not yet lost. Others would simply stand in silence, letting the weight of forgotten centuries settle upon them, heavy but strangely comforting. Time had not been kind to these temples. Earthquakes had shaken their columns, wars had scarred their walls, and the slow patience of wind and rain had worn away their beauty. Yet, despite it all, they endured. Some columns still rose tall, defiant against the horizon. Others lay scattered across the earth, broken but not destroyed. Even in fragments, the temples seemed alive, as though their stones had chosen rest rather than death. The hills around them grew quiet in the evening. Shadows stretched across the land, long fingers of dusk reaching for the ruins. Birds fell silent, and the air cooled with the approach of night. In those moments, the temples seemed to breathe, their silence deeper than words, their stillness heavier than stone. They were not empty. They were dreaming of gods whose names were now carved only in history, of sacrifices offered in flame, of prayers spoken beneath starry skies. Long ago, people came in crowds to these places. They climbed the marble steps barefoot, their hands carrying offerings of oil, honey, or grain. They lit fires in bronze braziers, their smoke rising to the heavens. They knelt, not before men, but before the invisible presence of gods who seemed to dwell in every stone, every shadow, every breeze that passed through the sacred grounds. Children watched in awe, elders bowed in reverence, and priests raised their voices in songs that filled the air with trembling devotion. But centuries had passed, and the crowds were gone. The gods no longer received offerings. Fires no longer burned in the braziers. The temples stood, silent witnesses to the end of worship. Yet even without worshippers, they remained proud, their marble bones unyielding, their silence eternal. Where once prayers had risen, now only the sound of the wind moved through their hollow spaces, carrying with it the faint suggestion of voices long gone. The land itself seemed to protect these sleeping temples. Grass grew tall around the fallen stones, weaving them into the earth as if cradling them. Olive trees bent their branches nearby, shading the ruins as though keeping watch. The sea, never far in Greece, sent breezes inland, its salt-scented breath brushing the marble as though to remind it of eternity. At night, the stars appeared above, the same stars the ancients had once gazed upon while praying beneath those columns. Though the people were gone, the universe remained, unchanging, eternal, bearing witness to the dream of stone. Travelers who found themselves near these ruins often spoke of a strange calm that came over them. They would sit quietly among the fallen blocks, their backs resting against stone once carved by the hands of artisans who believed their work was holy. Hours could pass without notice, as though time itself slowed in the presence of such silence. Some claimed they felt the gaze of the gods still lingering, not in fear, but in quiet recognition. Others felt nothing but peace, as if the temples offered rest to all who came near, just as they themselves rested in their sleep. Legends whispered that the stones could dream, not in the way mortals dream, with fleeting visions and forgetfulness, but in the way the earth dreams, slowly, deeply, with patience that outlasts empires. In these dreams, the temples remembered everything. They remembered the footsteps of those who built them, the sweat of laborers lifting marble into place, the chisel's strike as it carved sacred shapes into the stone. They remembered the songs of priests, the laughter of children chasing each other on holy grounds, the solemn prayers of kings who came seeking the gods' favor. All of it remained, folded into their silence, guarded in their sleep. And so, the stones endured, dreaming beneath the sun, whispering beneath the stars, waiting without hurry. They did not mourn what was lost, for loss was the way of all things. They did not weep for silence was its own kind of prayer. They simply slept, patient, unbroken, their dreams long and endless, their presence eternal. As morning broke over the Greek hills, the temples stirred beneath the light. The first rays of dawn painted their stones in soft gold, as if blessing them anew. Shadows slipped away, retreating into valleys, while the ruins glowed quietly, their weathered columns shining against the pale sky. For a moment, it seemed as though the temples were waking, not with voices or movement, but with a kind of radiance that came only when touched by the sun. Birdsong returned, fluttering through the air, and the world around the temples began to live again. Shepherds passed in the distance, their flocks moving slowly over grass that sparkled with dew. Farmers walked paths worn into the earth, glancing at the ruins with respect, even if they no longer worshipped as their ancestors had. To them, the temples were part of the landscape, silent companions to their daily toil, reminders that the land was old and filled with memory. Children, sometimes, would wander near the stones. They played among the fallen blocks, climbing them as though they were mountains, their laughter filling the quiet. They did not see ruins. They saw adventure, places to hide, to run, to dream. The stones accepted this gladly, for in their long sleep, they had known sorrow and silence. The sound of children was lightness, a fleeting joy, a reminder that time still turned and life still bloomed. Elders would often call the children back, warning them not to disturb the sacred grounds. For even though the gods had faded, respect lingered. The people of Greece could not forget entirely what these stones had meant. To step among them carelessly seemed almost like waking a sleeper who deserved rest. And so, the children would return, glancing back at the temples, their laughter fading into whispers as though they too sensed something greater. The marble itself bore marks of centuries. Cracks ran like veins across its surface, yet within those cracks, tiny plants grew, their roots binding themselves into the very heart of the stone. Lichens spread across the columns, softening their edges, giving them colors of green and gray. Rain had carved grooves into steps once polished by countless feet. But for all the wear, the marble still gleamed faintly, holding to its beauty even as time pressed down upon it. The temples were not all alike. Some were nearly whole, their rows of columns still forming proud outlines against the horizon. Others were little more than scattered fragments, blocks of stone that hinted at greatness, but no longer held their shape. Yet even the smallest fragment carried weight, for every piece of marble had once been part of something divine. The land remembered each temple in its own way, wrapping them in silence and patience, allowing them to fade but never vanish. Travelers who came from faraway lands often sought the ruins. They had read of Greece in books or heard of its gods in stories and wished to see for themselves the remnants of that ancient world. They walked carefully among the stones, eyes wide with reverence, hands brushing the cool surfaces as though they could feel history itself. Some spoke softly to companions, others kept silence, unwilling to break the spell. In the presence of the temples, even the proudest traveler felt small, humbled by the weight of centuries that stretched far beyond their own lives. At night, when stars filled the sky, the ruins seemed to glow faintly in moonlight. Columns stood like pale sentinels, watching the heavens with eyes that never closed. Owls perched upon the stones, their calls echoing across the valleys. The night air was cool, carrying with it the smell of earth and distant sea. Those who dared to walk among the ruins at this hour often felt as though they were stepping not in the present, but into another time. The silence of night made the temples dream louder, their memory pressing gently into the hearts of those who lingered. There were stories told in nearby villages about these nighttime wanderings. Some claimed to hear voices in the wind, ancient prayers spoken in a tongue they could not understand. Others swore they saw figures moving in the moonlight, shadows shaped like priests, or worshippers bowing at altars long crumbled. Few believed these tales completely, yet few dismissed them either. The people knew the land was old, and in old places, memory had a way of clinging. The temples themselves did not speak of ghosts or gods. They simply rested, content in their dreams. Yet in those dreams, the line between past and present blurred. A traveler might close their eyes and, for a heartbeat, imagine the temple whole again, its columns unbroken, its altars burning with flame, its steps crowded with worshippers. For that brief moment, the silence gave way to song, the ruins to radiance, the dream to life. And then, as quickly as it came, the vision would fade, leaving only stone, sky, and silence. The seasons touched the temples as gently as time. In spring, flowers grew wild at their feet, splashes of color against pale marble. In summer, cicadas filled the air with their endless song, their chorus echoing off the stones until it seemed the ruins themselves hummed with life. In autumn, leaves drifted down, gathering in corners, painting the ground in shades of gold and red. And in winter, rain fell heavy, soaking the earth, while cold winds swept through the columns like forgotten hymns. Each season brought change, yet the temples endured, unshaken, content to sleep through all of it. In the long rhythm of days and nights, the temple seemed almost alive, as though each stone had a breath hidden within it, slow and deep, stretching across centuries. The air around them carried a stillness that was not empty, but filled with waiting, like a pause between heartbeats. Travelers, shepherds, and villagers alike felt it when they drew near. The silence was not mere absence of sound. It was presence, weight, a reminder that time itself could linger. To stand before these sleeping temples was to feel both small and infinite. Small because the stones had seen countless lives rise and fall, empires born and gone, prayers spoken and silenced. Infinite because the same sky stretched above then and now, unbroken, a bridge between mortals and eternity. The temples belonged to neither past nor present. They simply were, beyond all measure of human time. Sometimes storms swept through the hills. Dark clouds gathered, heavy with rain, and thunder rolled like a distant drum. Lightning split the sky, and for moments the temples flashed bright, their marble gleaming white as though the gods had awakened them once more. Rain fell in sheets, soaking the ground, rushing through cracks in the stones. The ruins did not resist. They accepted the storm as they had accepted centuries, quietly, patiently, without fear. And when the storm passed, the stones shone wet beneath the sunlight, cleansed, renewed, as though they had been baptized by the sky itself. Wild animals moved freely among the ruins. Birds nested in the hollows of columns, their songs rising each dawn. Lizards darted over sun-warmed marble, their tiny feet whispering across its surface. In the evenings, foxes prowled the edges, slipping like shadows through the tall grass. Each creature lived without reverence or memory, yet their presence kept the ruins alive, filling them with motion even as the temples slept. The stones welcomed them, for to the ancient world, animals too had belonged to the sacred. There were shepherds who believed that their flocks grew calmer when grazing near the ruins. The animals wandered peacefully, their bells ringing softly, as if the silence of the stones had settled into them. At night, when shepherds lit small fires nearby, they sometimes looked at the dark shapes of the temples against the sky and felt comfort, as though guarded by something older and greater than themselves. These feelings were never spoken loudly, but they were held quietly in the heart, passed from one generation to another. Though centuries had passed since the last true prayers were spoken, stories clung to the temples like ivy. Villagers said that on rare nights, when the moon was high and the wind still, one could hear faint music, notes drifting through the ruins as though a lyre were played by unseen hands. Others whispered that dreams became strange after sleeping too near the temples, filled with images of gods, of oceans without end, of voices speaking in ancient tongues. Whether truth or imagination, these stories gave the stones a kind of gentle mystery. They were not just broken walls, they were dreamers, and in their dreams they touched the minds of those who drew too close. The stones themselves carried marks of worship. Some bore carvings, worn almost smooth by centuries, yet still visible if one looked closely. A line of letters, half erased by weather, whispered fragments of a forgotten prayer. A shallow relief of a figure, perhaps once a god, now blurred into shadow, lingered on a broken slab. Even in silence, the temples carried words, carved in a language that the earth refused to let vanish completely. The air seemed to change near the ruins. The breeze slowed, carrying with it the scent of thyme and sage that grew wild in the hills. The sound of footsteps softened, as though muffled by unseen hands. Many who walked among the stones found themselves lowering their voices without meaning to, as though instinct demanded respect. The silence was not empty. It was sacred, deep enough that even without faith, one felt compelled to bow to it. At midday, when the sun burned brightest, the marble reflected the light until the ruins seemed to glow. Travelers shielding their eyes might imagine the temples alive again, shining as they once did, when priests kept fires burning and worshippers crowded the steps. But the glow now was only sunlight, simple and unadorned, falling upon bones of stone. Yet even so, it was beautiful. The temples asked for nothing, gave nothing, yet their stillness was enough to stir wonder in all who saw them. Evenings brought a different mood. As the sun dipped low, the ruins darkened slowly, their edges softened by shadow. The world hushed around them, as if preparing for sleep alongside the stones. Crickets began their song, steady and endless, blending with the whisper of wind through the columns. A coolness fell over the land, and the temples seemed to settle deeper into their dreaming, their presence steady and unbroken as the first stars lit the sky. Those who camped near the ruins often found themselves staring at the stones long after nightfall. Fires burned low, casting flickering light on marble that shimmered like ghostly figures. The silence of the ruins seemed to seep into the heart, slowing thought, calming the restless mind. Sleep came gently, filled with dreams that felt both ancient and timeless, as though the temples themselves had shared their endless dreaming with those who rested at their feet. The people who lived nearby did not think of these temples as forgotten. To them, the stones were simply sleeping, as they had for centuries. They had not been abandoned, not truly. For in every glance, every whispered story, every step taken with care upon the sacred ground, the people remembered. The gods might have faded, the prayers might have ceased, but the stones endured. And in their endurance, they became more than temples. They became time itself, holding past and present together in their silent dreams. There were travelers who spoke of the temples as if they were guardians of dreams. They said that when one rested near the ruins, the mind wandered into strange landscapes. These dreams were not always peaceful, but they were never ordinary. A man might dream of walking through endless marble halls, where torches burned without smoke and shadows stretched long, but no figure was ever seen. A woman might dream of standing upon a mountain where the wind spoke in 1,000 voices, whispering names she did not know but felt she should remember. Children dreamed of bright-winged figures, both gentle and fierce, who watched from the edges of sleep. Dreams like these did not fade with waking. They clung, soft as cobwebs, through the day, reminding those who dreamed that they had touched something older than memory. Some found the experience comforting, as though the gods still cared for mortals, even if only through whispers of sleep. Others felt unsettled, uneasy at the thought of forces unseen shaping the quiet chambers of the mind. Yet none could deny the power of the place. The stones did not merely stand. They breathed into those who came near, leaving traces of wonder and dread. On quiet mornings, mist often drifted through the ruins, curling around broken columns like pale veils. The mist softened the world, blurring edges, turning each step into something uncertain and dreamlike. Birds called faintly through the fog, their cries echoing strangely as though they came from far away. In such moments, the temples seemed less like ruins and more like doorways, thresholds not between rooms, but between worlds. Those who walked through the mist sometimes said it felt as though they were trespassing in a place not entirely human. The villagers nearby never built houses too close to the ruins, not out of fear, but respect. They left a space between daily life and sacred silence, as though even in sleep the temples required breathing room. Children were told not to play among the stones after dark. It was not forbidden, only discouraged, for parents knew well that curiosity would bring young feet there anyway, and when it did, the children often returned quiet, their laughter subdued, their eyes carrying something they could not put into words. Travelers sometimes left offerings, though no priest remained to bless them. A coin laid carefully on a stone, a sprig of rosemary tucked into a crack, a piece of bread set gently near a column base. These were not acts of worship in the old sense, but small gestures of gratitude, as if acknowledging the presence of something unseen. The stones did not answer, but they held these offerings in silence, as they had held countless prayers before. By day the ruins seemed ancient but gentle, warmed by sunlight, softened by birdsong. By night they became vast and solemn, their shadows deep, their silence heavier. It was in the night that the sense of dreaming was strongest. The stars wheeled above, slow and bright, and the temples seemed to lie beneath them like sleeping giants, their breath measured in centuries. To look upon them then was to feel time not as days or years, but as an endless sea, and the temples were islands rising from its surface, steady, unmoving, eternal. Even the earth beneath the ruins seemed touched by their presence. Flowers grew stubbornly in cracks of marble, their roots drinking from unseen springs. Herbs flourished nearby, thyme and oregano spreading wild, their fragrance carried on every breeze. Bees hummed in the sun, moving between blossoms, as though the temples themselves had become hives of quiet life. The stones were not dead. They had simply changed their way of living, dreaming now in silence while the world moved around them. Stories traveled from one village to another, always changing yet always circling the same truth. The temples dreamed. Some told of shepherds who had seen figures moving among the ruins at dusk, tall and glowing, fading when approached. Others spoke of voices like wind, low and musical, rising from the stones themselves. And there were those who swore that when they placed an ear against the marble, they heard a faint heartbeat deep within, steady and slow as the turning of the world. To many, these tales were nothing more than imagination, born from mist and silence. But to others, they were proof that the gods had not gone, only retreated into sleep, waiting for a time when mortals might call them back. The temples did not argue. They neither confirmed nor denied. They simply endured, letting stories grow around them, as ivy grows upon stone. And so the ruins became part of the land's rhythm, woven into daily life, yet always set apart, like a dream remembered after waking. People passed by them on journeys, nodded in respect, sometimes stopped to rest, and then moved on. The temples did not cling to them, but they left impressions, soft marks upon memory, the way a dream leaves behind a feeling long after its images have vanished. The world beyond the ruins changed endlessly. Kingdoms rose, wars raged, merchants carried goods along roads that passed far from the temples. Yet within their circle of silence, the stones held still. Seasons turned, Vines climbed and fell, rains came and went, but the ruins remained what they were, dreamers of stone, sleeping yet eternal. Even travelers from far-off lands, strangers with no knowledge of the gods once worshipped there, felt something when they approached the ruins. They could not name it, but they carried it away with them. And when they returned home, their stories spread. Not tales of great events, not miracles or terrors, but of quiet stones that seemed alive, that seemed to breathe dreams into the world. And so the temples continued, century after century, sleeping in silence, dreaming of gods. They asked for nothing. They gave no answers, but they remained, steady as stars, patient as earth, waiting always. Like the storyteller's voice that lingers in the night, these temples remain a whisper across time, gentle, endless, and unforgettable. And if you've wandered with me this far into their silence, remember, sometimes the best way to honor such dreams is to carry them forward. So if you are listening, softly, kindly, don't forget to like and subscribe. The sea lay not far from many of these ancient temples, its waves rolling against the rocks in rhythms older even than the carved marble. Sailors would sometimes glimpse the white ruins from their ships, standing high on the cliffs or nestled inland where olive groves grew thick. To them, the temples seemed like watchtowers, silent guardians of the coast. When storms rose and the wind screamed across the water, sailors would whisper prayers toward the distant stones, asking for safe passage. Even those who no longer believed in gods still found themselves lifting their eyes toward the ruins, as though some instinct older than words guided them. At night, the sea reflected the stars, and when the temples stood in sight, their pale forms gleamed faintly, catching moonlight like mirrors. From a distance, they did not look broken, but whole again, their outlines softened by distance, their gaps filled by imagination. Travelers arriving by sea often said the ruins looked most alive in those moments, as though the gods still walked among them in silver shadows. The olive trees around the temples grew twisted and ancient, their trunks thick with centuries of growth, their roots wrapped deep into the earth, perhaps twining around the same foundations that once supported shrines and altars. In summer, their silver-green leaves shimmered in the heat, whispering in breezes that seemed to carry voices. Villagers harvested the olives with care, never cutting too close to the ruins, believing the trees carried blessings drawn from the stones themselves. The oil pressed from those olives was said to last longer, to burn cleaner in lamps, and to taste richer than oil from any other grove. Animals, too, seemed drawn to the temples. Birds nested in cracks of marble, swallows darting in and out of broken walls. Goats found shelter in the shade of fallen columns, their bells tinkling softly as they grazed nearby. At night, owls perched atop the highest stones, their calls echoing into the dark like watchmen's signals. Even stray dogs, weary from the road, often curled beside the warm stones to sleep, as if the ruins themselves offered protection. There was a rhythm to life around the ruins, though no one directed it. The temples seemed to guide the world quietly, not with command, but with presence. Farmers plowed their fields nearby, measuring seasons by the changing shadows the ruins cast. Shepherds led their flocks across hills, pausing at the temples as though marking the midpoint of a journey. Travelers followed paths that always seemed to bend toward the ruins, even when they had no reason to visit. And in the evenings, when the sun dipped low, casting long golden light across the stones, people would stop whatever they were doing and look. Just look, as though acknowledging something that needed no words. Some said the gods had retreated into the stones themselves, turning from flesh and fire to marble and shadow. Others believed the temples had become gods in their own right, no longer houses of worship but beings, ancient and dreaming, whose thoughts were too vast for mortals to understand. The debate did not matter. The stones endured, and their endurance became its own kind of divinity. Winds carried dust across the columns, softening their edges. Rain wore patterns into the marble, leaving delicate veins like age lines across a face. Time marked the temples, but it did not destroy them. Instead, it deepened them, giving them layers of memory. A traveler who brushed a hand across the stone might feel not only its present chill, but echoes of heat from ancient fires, faint as breath. To touch the ruins was to touch centuries. Poets sometimes came to sit among the ruins, scribbling verses in quiet solitude. They did not always seek inspiration. Some simply wished to be near the silence, to test their words against the vastness of stone. Their poems often carried the weight of stillness, lines about shadows, about wind, about sleep. The temples in their silence taught poets how to write gently, with patience, letting words rest as stones rested, unhurried, unbroken. The ruins also became places of farewell. Lovers parted there, leaving promises with the stones as witnesses. Families said goodbye to sons and daughters setting off on long journeys, whispering hopes for safe return. Even in death, the ruins played a role, for some chose to scatter ashes among the stones, believing that the spirits of the departed would join the eternal dream of the temples. In the heat of summer, cicadas droned endlessly in the grass around the ruins. Their song was steady, hypnotic, like the ticking of a clock too ancient to see. In winter, frost gathered on the marble, glittering like scattered stars. The temples took every season into themselves, changing yet unchanged, like an eternal breath rising and falling. Children sometimes asked their elders why the gods had left, why the temples slept instead of shining as they once did. The elders never gave one answer. Some said mortals had stopped listening, and so the gods grew quiet. Others said the gods were never truly gone, only dreaming through the stones. And still others said it was not for mortals to know, only to respect. These answers did not satisfy the children, but they carried them anyway, adding them to the long chain of questions that grew through life. In this way, the ruins were teachers. They did not speak lessons aloud, but they shaped the way people thought about time, about silence, about endurance. A broken column might teach more about strength than any spoken word. A shadow stretching across the grass might remind someone of how swiftly days pass, how patient the earth remains. The temples taught without teaching, simply by being. Sometimes storms broke suddenly over the land, thunder cracking above the hills, lightning flashing white against the columns. Rain fell in sheets, washing across stone, pooling in the crevices of steps long worn. In such moments, the ruins looked alive, glowing with each lightning strike, shadows leaping across them. To stand among them in a storm was to feel small, yet strangely connected, as if the sky itself was speaking to the stones, and the stones were listening. And when the storm passed, leaving the earth drenched and gleaming, the ruins stood just as before. Nothing shook them, not truly. They absorbed the storm into their silence, letting it pass, letting it become another memory added to their long dream. So they endured, the sleeping temples, holding both storms and stillness within them. Stones that dreamed of gods and of all who passed among them. In the cool of early morning, when dew still clung to the grass and the sky was painted in the faint blush of dawn, the temples seemed most tender. Birds stirred first, fluttering from branch to branch, their small voices ringing like bells through the silence. The stones caught the pale light slowly, changing from shadow to silver, and at last to soft gold. In these hours, the ruins looked less like remnants of the past and more like living beings waking from slumber. A column would glow as though it still bore the weight of a roof, and the faint outline of steps seemed ready to receive worshippers once again. The air was filled not with noise but with presence, a stillness that carried weight, like a pause in breath before speech. Travelers rising at such hours often sat still, forgetting their journeys for a time, simply to watch the stones. There was no need for words in those moments. The silence itself was enough, carrying within it something vast and steady. Some thought of ancestors who must have stood in the same place, seeing the same dawn on the same stones. Others thought of the gods who perhaps stirred faintly in their endless dreaming, touched by the rising light. Whether one believed or not did not matter. The temples did not require belief. They only required acknowledgement, a quiet glance, a moment of stillness. The ground around the ruins was not empty. Wild herbs grew thick, mint, sage, thyme, all carrying scents that mingled in the morning air. Farmers nearby would sometimes collect these herbs, leaving small sprigs behind in thanks. They said the herbs were stronger here, their flavors richer, their healing powers deeper. Healers valued them, and cooks prized them, but none took more than they needed, for it was said that greed in such a place would sour the gift. Butterflies often drifted among the flowers that bloomed in cracks of stone. Their wings added fleeting colors, orange, blue, pale yellow, like small fragments of stained glass floating through sunlight. Bees moved with purpose, tracing lines invisible to human eyes, carrying the temple's quiet life into the wider land. Even insects seemed to belong here, their hums and movements forming part of the great dream the stones carried. By midday, the sun climbed high, and shadows sharpened across the marble. The white of the stone grew almost blinding, and the air shimmered with heat. Cicadas sang endlessly, their steady rhythm filling the silence like a chant. In these hours, the ruins seemed less soft, more enduring, their broken shapes like bones of the earth itself. Travelers who walked among them in the heat often slowed, their steps heavy, their breath short. Yet the stones, unmoved by the sun's weight, stood firm, as though reminding all who came near of patience, of endurance. There were wells once near many temples, though most had long since dried. Yet some still held water, cool and clear, hidden deep below. Villagers knew where to find them and treated them with reverence. To drink from those wells was said to bring vivid dreams, sometimes comforting, sometimes strange. Shepherds told of visions seen in sleep after such water touched their lips. Visions of mountains lit in gold, or seas stretching endlessly, or voices whispering names they had never heard but somehow knew. These were not frightening dreams, but they lingered, carved into memory like lines cut into stone. In autumn, the winds grew sharper, carrying the scent of smoke from village hearths. Leaves fell in showers of color, settling against the white stones in patches of red, orange, and brown. The ruins wore these colors like cloaks, softening their sharp edges, reminding all who saw them that even marble was touched by the seasons. Children would sometimes gather the fallen leaves and scatter them across the steps, laughing as the wind lifted them again. In such moments, the ruins did not seem solemn but playful, as though sharing in the children's delight. In winter, snow sometimes blanketed the temples, though rarely heavy enough to break the silence. The white upon white made the ruins look whole again, as if roofs had returned and columns stood new. Icicles formed along broken edges, gleaming in the weak sun. Few visited in those months, but those who did spoke of a peace unlike any other. The cold sharpened sound, so that even the crunch of a single footstep echoed across the stones. To sit among the snow-covered ruins was to feel both the harshness and the gentleness of time. The harshness that broke stone, the gentleness that allowed it to remain. Night brought its own transformations. When the moon was full, the ruins glowed pale, casting long shadows that reached into the grass. The silence of night was deep, broken only by the cry of an owl or the rustle of a small animal. Some nights, clouds covered the sky, and the ruins vanished into darkness, invisible even to those standing near. On such nights, people said the stones dreamed more deeply, hidden from mortal eyes. When stars returned, the ruins seemed to wake again, their shapes outlined faintly in the silver light. Travelers who camped near the ruins often kept small fires, though not too close to the stones. They would sit around the flames, telling quiet stories, their voices low, as though afraid to disturb the ruins. The crackle of fire blended with the night sounds, weaving into the silence without breaking it. Sometimes, in pauses between words, it felt as though the stones themselves listened, carrying the stories into their endless dream. And so, the cycle of days and nights, seasons and years, wrapped endlessly around the temples. They were part of the earth's breathing, steady and unchanging, yet alive with all that passed near them. People, animals, winds, rains, all came and went, but the stones endured, carrying each moment gently, adding it to their long memory. They were not only ruins, They were dreamers, ancient and patient, holding the whispers of gods and mortals alike. Sometimes, travelers paused at the edge of the ruins, uncertain whether to step closer. The temples commanded a quiet awe that made hesitation natural. A single misstep could bring one onto broken stone or across uneven ground worn by centuries of wind and rain. Yet the hesitation was not born of fear alone. It was respect, a sense that the stones had lived longer than anyone could measure, and that to disturb them carelessly might rouse something unseen. And even when travelers moved slowly and carefully, they often felt a strange weight in the air, as though the ruins themselves had noticed, as though the stones were aware of each breath, each glance. The stones carried stories of those who had built them. Some were grand temples, towering structures that once reached for the sky with tall columns of gleaming marble. Craftsmen labored for years, carving each line, each shape, with devotion and precision. They worked under the sun, in heat and dust, lifting blocks too heavy for one person alone. Yet they persevered, believing they were creating something sacred. The tools they used, chisels, hammers, mallets, were simple, yet through skill and patience they transformed cold stone into shapes meant to honor gods. Even now, the marks of their hands remained faintly, etched into grooves and corners, a silent testament to human effort and faith. Pilgrims once climbed the steps of these temples with offerings in hand. Some brought bread, wine, or honey. Others brought oil for lamps that burned along stone altars. Children were carried on their parents' shoulders to see the inner sanctuaries, to glimpse statues of gods tall and proud, carved to inspire both awe and devotion. Priests moved among the crowds, their voices lifted in chants, their hands raised in ritual gestures. Music played, soft lyres and flutes filling the air with melodies that seemed to linger long after the notes had stopped. All of this was gone now, but the echoes remained, hidden in the grooves of the marble, in the spaces between columns, in the quiet that stretched across the ruins. Even in their absence, the gods seemed present. Travelers would occasionally whisper to them, asking for guidance, comfort, or understanding. No reply ever came in words. Yet some felt warmth in their chest, a faint hum in the air, a subtle shift in the wind that felt like acknowledgement. Others dismissed such experiences as imagination, products of lonely minds or overactive senses. But even skeptics could not deny the power of the ruins. They inspired stillness, reflection, and a strange sense of eternity, more than any words could convey. In summer, the heat seemed to intensify the presence of the stones. Marble, white and polished long ago, glowed in the sun, almost blinding to those who approached without shade. Birds sought refuge in cracks and hollows, calling to one another in short bursts. Travelers often carried water from nearby wells, placing it carefully back when finished. Even the smallest acts were treated with care, as if the land demanded mindfulness. No one rushed here. Time moved differently around the ruins. A single hour could feel like days, a single glance like centuries. Some ruins had been touched by lightning over the years. Scars ran across columns and altars, blackened streaks that contrasted sharply with white stone. These marks were reminders of the storms that had passed, of power both feared and revered. Yet the lightning never destroyed the essence of the temples. Instead, it became part of their story, woven into their being, as natural as wind or rain. Travelers often paused to examine the marks, tracing lines with fingers, imagining the thunder that had split the sky. Vines grew where they were allowed, climbing slowly over fallen stones. Ivy and wild grape embraced columns and walls, softening edges, filling empty spaces, and adding color to pale stone. In spring, flowers would bloom in cracks, tiny blossoms of blue, yellow, and white, stubbornly surviving where nothing else could. The temples became a meeting place of stone and life, rigid and soft at once, enduring and growing together. Even in winter, when snow and frost blanketed the ground, life persisted in small ways. Small animals burrowed beneath stones, seeking warmth. Birds huddled in hollows, their feathers puffed against the cold. Occasionally, a fox or hare would move silently across the land, leaving footprints in the fresh snow. The ruins did not mind such visitors. They accepted all who came near, whether human, animal, or the wind itself. In villages nearby, legends persisted about the sleeping temples. People said that if one listened carefully, the stones whispered. Some claimed to hear the faint echo of old prayers or the soft hum of lyres. Others said that dreams were richer when sleeping near the ruins, carrying visions of gods and heroes long past. The elders passed these stories down, careful not to exaggerate, for respect was as much a part of the tradition as memory. Even children learned that the ruins were alive in some sense, not in motion, but in presence, in patience, in endless dreaming. Sometimes visitors would sit quietly at dawn, waiting for the sun to touch the stones. They would close their eyes, letting the air, the smell of herbs, and the soft sounds of the land fill them. Time slowed, as it always did near the ruins, and their minds drifted. They might imagine columns standing intact, statues carved sharp and brilliant, or priests moving through halls with ritual and purpose. And when they opened their eyes, the ruins were still broken, still quiet, yet somehow more alive than before. For the imagination of mortals had awakened their ancient memory. The temples endured through wars, fires, and earthquakes, bearing the marks of human ambition and error. Kings and armies marched past, leaving little concern for the sacred stones. Fires sometimes reached them, charring edges or collapsing roofs. Yet the ruins survived. Even fragments of columns, broken altars, and scattered stones held the essence of the original design. Travelers marveled at this resilience, feeling a quiet awe at the ability of stone to endure beyond the lifespans of kingdoms and people. Some said that the gods slept within the marble, not gone but resting, dreaming their own dreams while the world moved on. Others believed that the ruins themselves had become their own gods, existing without need of worship, steady and eternal. Neither idea could be proven, but neither could be denied. The truth, it seemed, lay in the quiet, the patience, the way the stones held the land, the sky, and the memory of all who had once walked their halls. In the afternoons, when the sun slanted low and painted the hills with warm gold, the temples seemed to breathe gently with the land itself. Shadows lengthened, stretching across marble like the hands of time, touching every broken corner and smooth surface. Travelers who lingered often closed their eyes, listening to the subtle hum of the earth. The wind brushing through olive trees, the faint rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of the sea. In those moments, it was easy to imagine the stones dreaming of gods, recalling the long line of worshippers who had once ascended their steps, and feeling their presence like a slow heartbeat beneath one's feet. Pilgrims who had once visited these temples brought with them small tokens, some carved from wood, others shaped from clay, each meant as a gift to the divine. Though time had erased most of these offerings, a few remained tucked in corners, half buried by soil, their shapes softened by centuries of weather. Birds and small animals sometimes disturbed them, carrying fragments to new places, yet each piece seemed to retain a memory of devotion, a whisper of the reverence that had shaped it. The stones accepted these tokens in silence, holding them as part of their own enduring dream. Even today, travelers sometimes left new offerings. A coin placed carefully on a step, a sprig of thyme tucked into a crack, a small ribbon tied around a fragment of column. These gestures were not required, and the ruins did not demand them. Yet those who left such tokens often felt lighter, as if the act of giving, even to silent stone, had shifted something within them. It was a quiet exchange, wordless and delicate, part of the long rhythm of the temple's dreaming life. The sun continued its slow descent, and the air cooled. Shadows deepened, transforming the ruins into shapes both familiar and strange. Travelers who walked among the columns found themselves tracing edges with eyes and fingers, following cracks as though reading a story written in stone. Some imagined the steps lined with worshippers, the altars glowing with offerings, the priests moving in ritual patterns. Others imagined the gods themselves, ethereal figures lingering in the air, watching, dreaming alongside the stones. In both cases, the past seemed almost present, a soft hum beneath the surface of reality. In nearby villages, people often spoke in hushed tones about what the ruins might contain. Elders told stories of miracles that were never verified, visions in dreams, voices carried on wind, sudden warmth that could not be explained. Children listened, fascinated, sometimes skeptical, yet always respectful. The tales were never frightening, only gentle, carrying a sense of wonder. They reminded listeners that the temples were more than stone. They were memory, patience, and endurance made tangible. The landscape around the temples changed slowly, yet always in ways the ruins could accommodate. Grass grew in the spaces between fallen stones, softening edges and weaving the ruins into the earth. Wildflowers sprouted in spring, delicate blues, yellows, and whites that contrasted with pale marble. In summer, the cicadas droned endlessly, their chorus blending with distant voices from the villages and the gentle rush of the wind. Autumn brought leaves drifting across the steps and broken walls, softening the sharpness of edges, painting the ruins in red, gold, and brown. Even winter with frost and snow could not erase their presence. It only added another layer to their quiet beauty. Travelers who stayed the night often camped nearby, sitting around small fires that crackled softly. They spoke in low voices, careful not to disturb the ruins' slumber. At times, the night air carried faint melodies, imagined or perhaps real, the distant echo of lyres or flutes, long silent. Some travelers swore they saw figures among the columns, pale and indistinct, moving as shadows in the moonlight. Others heard whispers in the wind, soft and melodic, unintelligible yet strangely comforting. Whether dream or reality, the experience left an impression, proof to some that the temples dreamed and that their dream was shared, even faintly, with those who came near. The stones themselves bore witness to countless storms. Lightning had marked some columns with dark streaks, cracks split others, and floods had washed away soil to reveal hidden foundations. Yet the temples endured. They absorbed each event into their long memory, incorporating damage as part of their story rather than as destruction. Travelers who studied these marks often felt humility, realizing the vastness of time that had passed and the endurance required for stone to survive centuries of human activity, weather, and neglect. Animals contributed quietly to the life of the ruins. Birds nested in hollows, swallows darted between broken walls, and owls perched silently on the highest stones. Small mammals scurried beneath columns, while foxes occasionally wandered across open areas, leaving footprints in the soft soil. The presence of these creatures added a delicate layer of life to the sleeping temples. They did not disturb the dream. They became part of it, moving naturally through the spaces the stones had shaped over centuries. Even travelers with no belief in gods felt a subtle shift in the air near the ruins. It was not magic, nor a trick of the mind, but a profound sense of connection. One could sense the weight of memory, the patient endurance of stone, the long, careful dreaming of marble and earth. People often found themselves walking slowly, pausing more frequently, lowering their voices. It was impossible to rush here. Time stretched differently, measured not in minutes or hours, but in the slow pulse of centuries. Sometimes travelers wrote down what they saw and felt, scribbling journals by the light of fading sun or flickering fire. Their words attempted to capture the quiet majesty of the ruins, but always fell short. How could any human language convey the patience of stone, the dreaming of gods, the slow rhythm of memory stretching across generations? Still, the act of recording helped anchor their experience, allowing them to carry a part of the temple's calm and endurance with them when they returned to the world beyond. And so, the sleeping temples continued, stone after stone, column after column, carrying within them the dreams of gods, the memory of worshippers, and the quiet endurance of the earth itself. They required nothing of the living, yet gave everything through presence alone. To be near them was to feel time differently, to hear silence in its fullest sense, to understand that some things endure not by force, but by patience. If you have wandered with me this far into their quiet, take a moment to carry the feeling forward. Like the temples, let the calm and stillness become part of your day. And if you found value in sharing this journey, remember to like and subscribe, so that more may wander with us through the endless dreaming of stone. As the months passed, travelers learned the subtle patterns of the temples. Each ruin had its own rhythm, its own way of interacting with the sun, the wind, and the seasons. Some temples were best visited in the morning, when mist lingered in valleys and the stones seemed to glow with hidden life. Others were at their most powerful in the evening, bathed in golden light, when shadows stretched long and soft across the worn steps. Even the smallest fragments of broken columns carried meaning, casting shapes that hinted at the original grandeur, inviting imagination to reconstruct what had been lost. The paths leading to the temples were often unpaved, winding through hills, olive groves, and fields. Travelers who followed these paths learned to move slowly, to notice the smallest details, the curve of a hill, the scent of herbs in the wind, the distant call of birds. Each step became deliberate, a quiet practice in observation and patience. And when the temples finally appeared, rising from the earth like fragments of eternity, the reward was more than visual. It was the sense of entering a sacred space, even if no deity remained to greet them. During certain times of the year, the temples seemed to interact with the changing light in ways that fascinated both poets and painters. Dawn painted some columns in soft pinks and golds. Sunset bathed the same stones in deep oranges and reds. Shadows cast by broken walls formed intricate patterns on the ground, sometimes resembling figures or symbols, fleeting as dreams. Artists sought these moments, hoping to capture the ephemeral beauty, yet they all knew that no canvas or paper could fully contain the effect. The ruins existed beyond representation. They were experience, memory, and imagination combined. Travelers who lingered for several days often remarked on a subtle change in perception. Time slowed, worries felt distant, and even silence carried a weight of meaning. The temples seemed to whisper lessons not in words, but in presence. They spoke of patience, endurance, and the quiet power of memory. They reminded visitors that not all greatness was loud or demanding. Some of it endured silently, surviving storms, neglect, and the relentless passage of years. Some ruins were partially reconstructed, though care was always taken to maintain authenticity. Archaeologists and historians worked to uncover hidden chambers, stabilize crumbling columns, and protect inscriptions from further erosion. Even in restoration, the temples retained their mystery. Every act of rebuilding had to respect the dream already embedded in the stone, ensuring that the living work of history did not disturb the quiet life of the ruins. Travelers often noted the small details that spoke of the temple's original purpose. A carved relief hinted at rituals long forgotten. A faint inscription revealed the name of a god or a worshipper. The placement of a column suggested the direction of sunrise during solstices. These details, though subtle, carried the weight of centuries and provided a bridge between the past and present. By noticing them, travelers became part of the temple's ongoing story, connecting briefly with the long line of human devotion and artistry that had shaped the stones. Evenings brought a different character to the ruins. As the sun sank low, shadows merged into darkness, and the air cooled. The faint rustle of leaves, the distant cry of nocturnal animals, and the occasional murmur of a traveler created a quiet symphony. Those who stayed late often felt as though the stones themselves were listening, absorbing the sounds of the living and incorporating them into their dream. Nights were longer in perception than in reality. The absence of bright light and the presence of stillness extended time, deepening the sense of connection to the ancient past. Villages nearby sometimes carried out small rituals of remembrance. A simple offering of bread, a prayer spoken softly to the wind, or a moment of silence at the edge of the ruins honored the temple's presence. These acts were not tied to formal religion. Rather, they were expressions of respect and memory. People recognized that the stones had witnessed countless lives, joys, and sorrows. In their own way, the villagers contributed to the ongoing life of the temples, ensuring that even as gods faded, the human connection endured. The earth beneath the temples seemed fertile with history. Wildflowers bloomed in unlikely places, roots entwined with marble, and moss-softened edges of broken steps. The ground itself carried the weight of footsteps through centuries. Pilgrims, worshippers, travelers, and children all had moved across these stones. Each footfall became part of the quiet story embedded in the ruins, an invisible layer of life that no wind or rain could erase. Travelers sometimes encountered unexpected phenomena, a faint glow in a crack of stone, a gentle warmth under the sun's rays, or a wind that seemed to carry whispers. Some interpreted these as signs of lingering divinity. Others attributed them to natural phenomena. Regardless of interpretation, the experiences deepened the sense that the temples were not inert. They were repositories of memory, endurance, and quiet life, interacting with those who approached with curiosity and respect. Poets continued to find inspiration here. They wrote verses about shadow and light, about the wind moving through columns, about the slow, steady heartbeat of stone. Painters captured the textures, colors, and angles of ruins under varying light, knowing that each image would only hint at the depth of experience. Even historians and archaeologists, whose work demanded precise measurement and observation, could not escape the sense of awe. The temples demanded attention, presence, and humility. They reminded all who came that some things could not be fully known, only felt and respected. Seasons brought their own lessons. Spring reminded travelers of renewal, of life persisting among stone. Summer demonstrated endurance, the ability to withstand heat, storms, and constant change. Autumn offered reflection, a softening of edges and colors, reminding humans of the passage of time. Winter revealed resilience, the capacity to survive frost and snow without losing essence. The temples incorporated all seasons, weaving each into their ongoing dream, teaching patience, observation, and acceptance. And in this way, the sleeping temples continued, stone by stone, shadow by shadow, dream by dream. They did not require worship, attention, or even acknowledgement. Yet those who visited often found themselves changed subtly, carrying away a sense of connection, memory, and wonder. They endured, not for fame or recognition, but because they were patient, timeless, and steadfast. If you have wandered this far into their quiet world, remember the lessons they carry. Patience, endurance, and stillness can be gifts for those who seek them. And if you've enjoyed this journey through the dreaming temples, don't forget to like and subscribe so that others may wander alongside us in silence and awe. As centuries passed, nature slowly reclaimed much of the land around the temples. Grass and shrubs grew thick between fallen stones, vines crept up broken columns, and wildflowers painted the ruins with fleeting bursts of color. Yet this reclamation did not diminish the temple's presence. Instead, it added layers to their quiet story, weaving the living world into the enduring memory of stone. Travelers who wandered through these green corridors often felt a delicate balance between decay and renewal, between human creation and nature's persistent embrace. The temples were repositories not just of stone, but of human history and imagination. Every carving, crack, and inscription told a story. Some remembered, others forgotten. Pilgrims' footsteps still echoed faintly in memory. Prayers whispered long ago seemed to linger in the air like mist. Even fragments of statues held silent authority, commanding respect despite centuries of weathering. Each detail invited contemplation, revealing the ways humans had sought connection with forces greater than themselves, and how those forces, in turn, shaped human perception and culture. Travelers often marveled at the precision with which the ancient builders had worked. Though some columns leaned or crumbled, the overall layout of temples remained harmonious. Each line, angle, and curve was carefully designed, whether to catch sunlight at certain hours or to frame views of the surrounding landscape. Scholars speculated endlessly about these choices, sometimes agreeing, often disagreeing. Yet whether perfectly understood or not, the effect on visitors was undeniable. Awe, reflection, and a sense of being part of something far greater than ordinary life. Children sometimes ventured near the ruins with a sense of curiosity and play. They traced patterns in stone with fingers, imagining gods walking beside them, warriors resting after long battles, or mythical creatures hiding in shadows. Their laughter echoed softly against the marble, carrying with it a sense of joy that complemented the temple's quiet grandeur. Adults watching these children often smiled, recognizing that even in play, humans were drawn to these sacred remnants, responding instinctively to the power embedded in stone. Many visitors noted that light transformed the ruins throughout the day. Morning mist softened edges, turning broken walls into dreamlike forms. Midday sun highlighted textures, revealing intricate details in carvings and inscriptions. Afternoon shadows stretched long across steps and columns, painting patterns that shifted subtly with time. As evening fell, golden light bathed the ruins in warmth, emphasizing their endurance and silent dignity. Even moonlight offered its own magic, casting a silver glow that suggested the stones held secrets just beyond mortal perception. The wind played a quiet but constant role in shaping experience. It whispered through columns, rustled leaves, and stirred small animals. Sometimes it carried scents from distant olive groves or wildflowers growing on the slopes. Other times, it seemed to carry echoes of voices long silent, faintly reminiscent of prayers, songs, or stories once spoken near the stones. Those who paused to listen often felt the wind not as an interruption but as a messenger, connecting them with centuries of human life and divine imagination. Some ruins had hidden chambers or subterranean spaces, long abandoned yet revealing traces of ancient rituals. Travelers sometimes stumbled upon these spaces, discovering carvings, small fragments of statues, or shallow basins that had once held water or offerings. Even when these discoveries were fragmentary, they spoke volumes about the devotion, artistry, and patience of those who built and maintained the temples. Every hidden detail became part of the ongoing dream the stones carried, adding depth and mystery to an already timeless presence. Birds, insects, and small mammals continued to make the ruins their home. Swallows nested in cracks, bees moved among flowers and herbs, and foxes or hedgehogs passed silently through the ruins at night. Their presence reminded visitors that life continued alongside the enduring memory of the stones. The ruins were not sterile or lifeless. They were spaces where stone and life coexisted, teaching subtle lessons about balance, patience, and harmony. Travelers often reflected on how different the temples felt when approached alone versus in groups. Alone, the silence could be profound, giving space for introspection and personal connection. Every sound, the breeze, a bird call, footsteps, was amplified, carrying meaning beyond ordinary perception. In groups, conversation softened, laughter became quieter, and visitors moved with shared awareness. Either way, the temples encouraged mindfulness, teaching that presence and attention were gifts to both the observer and the observed. Legends persisted among villagers near the temples. Some spoke of nights when the ruins seemed to glow faintly without moonlight, or of dreams so vivid that travelers awoke carrying visions of gods, heroes, or long-lost rituals. Others told of subtle signs, a particularly shaped cloud, an unusually warm breeze, a sudden hush in the wind, that indicated divine awareness or blessing. Whether true or imagined, these stories reinforced the sense of the temples as active participants in the world, capable of touching human experience in ways both subtle and profound. Even scholars, historians, and archaeologists felt the weight of the temple's presence. Precise measurements, detailed drawings, and careful excavations could document the physical structures, but none could capture the feeling of standing among them, of sensing centuries layered in silence. Every broken column, worn step, and etched relief carried a story that no document could fully convey. The temples existed beyond documentation. They were experience, memory, and dream combined. Nightfall brought another layer of depth. The ruins, softened by twilight, seemed to breathe in rhythm with the wind. Owls called across open spaces, while small animals moved quietly beneath columns. Stars emerged in the sky, their light reflected faintly on marble surfaces. Travelers often pause to observe this transformation, feeling the depth of time and presence. In such moments, it was easy to imagine the temples dreaming, silently and patiently, carrying all experiences into a timeless memory. The seasons continued their quiet cycles, shaping the temples and surrounding land. Spring brought renewal, summer endurance, autumn reflection, and winter resilience. Each cycle added richness to the experience, reinforcing the sense that the temples were not simply relics, but participants in a living, breathing world. Travelers learned to read these signs, adjusting their visits to capture particular aspects of light, sound, and atmosphere. In doing so, they became part of the temple's ongoing dream, contributing to a continuum of observation, reflection, and reverence. In this way, the sleeping temples of Greece remained both ancient and alive, silent yet expressive, broken yet complete. Stone after stone, shadow after shadow, dream after dream. They endured beyond human measure, offering lessons in patience, stillness, and endurance. Those who approached with attention found themselves touched by more than architecture. They encountered a presence older than themselves, a quiet resonance that carried through centuries and across landscapes. And if you have wandered with me this far into the dreaming world of these temples, take a moment to carry their calm into your day. Let patience, stillness, and wonder guide your steps. And if you've enjoyed this journey, remember to like and subscribe, so others may also explore the timeless whispers of stone and memory. By midday, the ruins seemed to awaken under the sun's steady gaze. Travelers noticed how light transformed every surface, highlighting fine details in carvings and inscriptions that had survived centuries. Shadows deepened in the hollows of broken columns, giving the illusion of hidden figures lingering just out of sight. The stones themselves seemed to exude warmth, absorbing sunlight and radiating it slowly into the surrounding air. This subtle heat made sitting on a worn step or leaning against a column unexpectedly comforting, as if the temples offered quiet hospitality to all who came near. The surrounding hills contributed to the atmosphere of the temples. Olive groves, rocky slopes, and scattered wildflowers framed the ruins, creating natural corridors that guided travelers' eyes and steps. Paths worn by countless generations curved gently, leading to vantage points that offered breathtaking views of the temples in context with their landscape. From these points, one could see how the structures harmonized with the land, rising organically from hills and valleys, as if the builders had been guided by a deep understanding of earth, light, and air. In early spring, the smell of damp earth and wildflowers filled the air. Travelers often paused, inhaling deeply, finding themselves rooted to the moment. Bees moved from blossom to blossom, their hum blending with the soft rustle of leaves. Birds called across the groves, punctuating the quiet with song. The temple seemed to embrace these sounds, integrating them into the ongoing rhythm of their long memory. Even small details, a spider's web glinting in sunlight, dew sparkling on marble edges, felt meaningful, as if the ruins themselves taught attention to subtleties often overlooked in ordinary life. Visitors sometimes lingered for hours, letting their minds wander through time. They imagined priests moving through the temple halls, carrying offerings and chanting prayers. They pictured craftsmen carving marble with care, their hands guided by both skill and reverence. They imagined gods observing, silent yet present, or perhaps dreaming alongside the stones themselves. Even when no physical trace remained of these actions, the imagination filled the gaps, allowing history and memory to converge with the present moment. The temples were not static. They interacted with every visitor, subtly altering perception. A glance at a column could spark reflection. A shadow cast across the ground could inspire wonder. Travelers often found themselves walking more slowly, speaking less, and listening more deeply. In these moments, the ruins demanded attention not through force, but through presence. Their quiet authority shaped behavior and thought, demonstrating a form of power that was enduring, patient, and unobtrusive. In summer, the heat accentuated the contrast between sunlit marble and shadowed recesses. Travelers sought shade beneath the remains of roofs or within broken walls. The air shimmered with warmth, carrying scents of herbs, dust, and distant pine. Cicadas droned tirelessly, their sound forming a constant backdrop, almost meditative in its persistence. Even in such heat, the ruins conveyed a sense of calm, as if their endurance absorbed discomfort, allowing visitors to participate in the slow rhythm of centuries. Some ruins held water sources, wells or cisterns, long abandoned yet still partially functional. Travelers occasionally discovered cool water at the base of steps or in hidden hollows. Drinking from these sources was often seen as a small ritual, a connection to the past, a reminder of the human effort required to sustain life in ancient times. Stories persisted that drinking from these stones could inspire dreams, revealing visions of gods, heroes, or long-lost ceremonies. Whether true or imagined, such experiences reinforced the sense that the temples remained alive in subtle, intangible ways. Autumn transformed the landscape dramatically. Leaves fell in golden showers, carpeting the ground and softening the starkness of broken marble. The temples seemed to glow against the rich hues, every edge and crack highlighted by the changing light. Travelers marveled at this seasonal shift, feeling that the ruins communicated in color and shadow as much as in form and presence. The interplay of stone, foliage, and sunlight created a living painting, continually evolving yet rooted in the permanence of the temples themselves. Villagers maintained traditions linked to the temples. Some collected herbs that grew naturally among the ruins, leaving offerings of thanks in return. Others visited for quiet reflection, sitting on fallen columns or leaning against ancient walls. These practices were not religious obligations, but expressions of respect and memory. They honored the enduring presence of the ruins, acknowledging that the temples had outlasted countless human endeavors, yet continued to inspire reverence, curiosity, and reflection. Nightfall brought a different atmosphere. The ruins, softened by darkness, seemed to exhale, releasing the heat of the day into the cool air. Owls called from high perches, small mammals moved quietly beneath columns, and distant stars shimmered in the sky above. Travelers often paused, listening to the night sounds and observing how shadows reshaped familiar forms. The interplay of moonlight, stone, and darkness added layers of mystery, suggesting hidden lives, silent memories, and dreams carried through centuries. Evening shadows often revealed details unnoticed in daylight. The soft curve of a column, the faint etching of a symbol, the irregular edge of a step, all became more prominent. Travelers attuned to these subtleties found that their perception expanded, noticing patterns and relationships between elements previously overlooked. The temples encouraged this careful observation, teaching patience, focus, and a deeper awareness of one's surroundings. Some travelers returned repeatedly, seeking different experiences at different times of day or year. Each visit offered new insights, a sunrise illuminating carvings in unexpected ways, a sudden wind stirring leaves across a marble floor, or the rare presence of wildlife among the ruins. These repeated encounters deepened appreciation and understanding, creating a layered experience that combined memory, observation, and imagination. Throughout all seasons, the temples remained patient, silent, and enduring. Their broken columns, worn steps, and scattered fragments carried centuries of observation, devotion, and artistry. Travelers, whether casual wanderers or dedicated scholars, could sense this presence. They left quietly, carrying memories, reflections, and lessons drawn from their encounters. And the temples, in turn, absorbed these experiences into their ongoing dream, maintaining the rhythm of life, stone, and memory. If you have followed this journey this far, take a moment to reflect on the quiet lessons of patience, endurance, and stillness. Let them guide your steps beyond these words. And if you've enjoyed this passage through the dreaming temples, remember to like and subscribe, so others may experience the subtle wonder of these ancient stones. Morning returned to the ruins with quiet certainty. The pale light of dawn filtered through olive groves and low hills, touching the temples with a gentle warmth. Travelers who rose early marveled at the way the stones seemed to capture and hold the light, reflecting it softly onto the surrounding grass and flowers. Even broken columns glowed with subtle energy, and every crack and groove appeared more intricate in the cool clarity of early day. Birds stirred first, their songs carrying over the hills, blending with the faint hum of insects beginning their daily work. The wind moved through the ruins with care, brushing gently across worn surfaces, carrying scents of earth, flowers, and distant groves. Occasionally, it seemed to shift in ways that suggested presence, as if unseen beings passed among the columns. Travelers felt this subtle energy keenly. Some attributed it to imagination, others to the lingering memory of worshippers long gone. Either way, the experience was unmistakable. The temples were alive in their own quiet, patient way. Footsteps on broken stone produced sounds that resonated differently in the morning. The cool air amplified each movement, every shuffle of sandals or brush of fabric. Travelers learned to walk with gentleness, respecting both the physical fragility and the spiritual weight of the space. Even children moving lightly across the ruins could sense the hush that fell upon the stones, as if they themselves demanded care and attention. Scattered herbs and wildflowers contributed not only color, but fragrance. Mint, thyme, sage, and small blossoms filled pockets of soil between stones. Bees and butterflies moved in delicate dances, pollinating freely, their hum and motion blending naturally with the ambient quiet. Travelers often paused to observe, noting how life persisted even in spaces partially reclaimed by centuries of wind, rain, and neglect. This coexistence of stone and living organism offered a lesson. Endurance and vitality could exist together, softening edges without diminishing strength. Columns bore the marks of human hands long gone. Chisels had carved reliefs and inscriptions that carried meaning beyond the visual. Though some had been eroded by time, others remained distinct, offering subtle glimpses into the beliefs, artistry, and intent of ancient builders. Travelers often traced the edges with fingers, careful not to disturb the stone, yet eager to feel a connection across time. Each touch, each glance was an acknowledgement of human effort meeting natural endurance, a small contribution to the temple's ongoing memory. The temple's layout often reflected careful consideration of light and alignment. Doorways, steps, and altars were arranged to catch sun at particular hours, illuminate carvings at certain seasons, or align with distant landscapes. Scholars debated the intentions, historians analyzed patterns, and travelers speculated freely. Yet regardless of theory, the effect on those who moved through the space was unmistakable. The ruins guided attention, fostered contemplation, and offered subtle instruction in observation and patience. Animals contributed quietly to the rhythm of life. Swallows nested in column hollows, foxes moved through shaded areas at night, and small mammals burrowed beneath rubble. Their presence did not disrupt the temple's calm. Instead, it enriched the sense of continuity. Life, both human and non-human, intertwined seamlessly with the enduring stone, suggesting that survival, coexistence, and adaptation were essential components of the ruins' long dream. Some travelers sought the ruins specifically for the quiet lessons they offered. Sitting on steps, leaning against columns, or walking slowly along worn paths, they found a sense of perspective. Time stretched differently near the temples, measured not in hours, but in centuries. The stones reminded visitors that endurance did not require force, but patience, that memory and presence mattered as much as activity, and that beauty often revealed itself through observation and care. Occasionally, hidden corners revealed small wonders, a delicate carving previously unnoticed, a tiny flower growing from a crack, a subtle curve of stone catching the sun. These discoveries delighted travelers, reminding them that the temples held secrets for those patient enough to notice. Even fragments of statues or broken altars carried power, suggesting the stories and rituals once performed there. Each new detail reinforced the sense that the ruins were alive in perception, carrying the weight of human history alongside the quiet persistence of nature. Legends and stories continued to circulate in nearby villages. Elders spoke of dreams inspired by the ruins, faint glows at twilight, or whispers carried on wind. Children listened, absorbing the reverence woven into these tales. Travelers often found themselves recalling these stories, noticing small details that matched descriptions. A column catching the first light of dawn, a faint scent of herbs in an unexpected corner, a sudden hush in the wind. Whether coincidence, imagination, or lingering presence, these moments strengthened the sense that the temples were more than stone. They were memory, history, and dream. Sunlight shifted slowly throughout the day, transforming every aspect of the ruins. Afternoon shadows stretched across broken walls, creating new shapes and revealing previously unseen details. Travelers often paused to watch, recognizing that perception was not static. Every angle, every light, every breeze offered a new interpretation, a fresh lesson. The temples invited participation, not through instruction but through observation, offering guidance in subtlety, patience, and awareness. Evening brought another layer of depth. As light softened, colors became warmer, shadows lengthened, and air cooled. Travelers often lingered to watch the transition, absorbing both the visual spectacle and the emotional resonance. Small animals prepared for night, birds settled in hollows, and distant stars began to appear. The ruins seemed to exhale, releasing the heat and energy of the day into the night, reinforcing their timeless presence. Paths leading to and from the temples held their own stories. Worn by countless footsteps, shaped by rain and wind, they guided travelers through landscapes steeped in memory. Each curve revealed a new perspective, a fresh view of the ruins, or a subtle interaction of stone and nature. Moving along these paths demanded mindfulness, offering a lesson in care and observation that extended beyond the temples themselves. And so the temples continued, enduring through sun, wind, rain, and snow. Stone after stone, column after column, fragment after fragment, they carried the memory of builders, worshippers, and travelers alike. They offered lessons in patience, resilience, and observation, extending an invitation to those willing to pause and notice. In their quiet, steadfast way, they remained alive, dreaming through centuries and inviting all who approached to dream alongside them. If you have followed this journey this far, remember to carry the calm, patience, and presence into your own days. And if you've appreciated this passage through the timeless dreaming of the temples, don't forget to like and subscribe so that more may wander quietly through the echoes of stone and memory. The deeper one wandered into the ruins, the more subtle the lessons became. Every step along uneven stone demanded attention, teaching patience and mindfulness. Travelers often found themselves slowing down naturally, their breathing adjusting to the rhythm of the land. Even those unaccustomed to quiet contemplation found themselves attentive to the smallest details. The curve of a column, the pattern of moss growing in a crack, the faint sound of wind weaving through hollowed stone. In this way, the temples trained perception without words, guiding visitors toward awareness of the present moment. The air carried an invisible history. Every breeze, every gust seemed to have passed through centuries of worshippers, pilgrims, and artisans. Travelers sometimes imagined that they could feel this invisible current, a stream of energy linking past and present. The stones themselves seemed to hum faintly with memory, as though holding a record of countless acts of devotion and creativity. Even those skeptical of spiritual notions could not deny a certain gravity, a presence that shifted perception and deepened reflection. Nearby groves provided shade and comfort. Olive trees, gnarled with age, spread wide branches over the paths and steps. Their leaves whispered with every breeze, offering subtle accompaniment to the silence of the ruins. Occasionally, a traveler would pause beneath a tree, resting against the trunk, listening to the rustling leaves, and feeling an unexpected intimacy with both nature and stone. These moments reinforced a sense of continuity. Humans, trees, and stone coexisting across centuries in a delicate balance. In spring, wildflowers added color to otherwise pale stone. Bluebells, daisies, and small violets sprouted in cracks and gaps, defying harsh weather to bloom among the ruins. Travelers often knelt to observe them, marveling at life thriving amidst decay. The contrast of delicate flowers against enduring marble emphasized the interplay of fragility and strength, showing how life could persist alongside permanence. Birds and insects moved through these blooms, completing a living tableau that transformed the ruins from static relics into a dynamic ecosystem. As visitors explored further, they discovered hidden corners and alcoves. Some contained small carvings, inscriptions, or fragments of statues. Others revealed spaces where rituals might once have taken place, perhaps for offerings or quiet reflection. The sense of discovery brought an intimacy to the ruins, making travelers feel as though they were participating in a dialogue with history. Even the smallest finding, a faint relief, a chipped edge, a worn step, could evoke awe, connecting present-day observers to ancient builders and worshippers. Many travelers noted that sound behaved differently among the columns. A whispered word carried farther than expected, footsteps echoed with unexpected clarity, and even the smallest rustle of leaves seemed amplified. This acoustic quality encouraged silence and attentiveness, turning simple acts into meditative experiences. Listening became as important as seeing, revealing the temple's layered presence through both visual and auditory perception. Some ruins contained traces of water systems, cisterns, channels, or basins carved into stone. Though long abandoned, these features demonstrated ingenuity and practical skill. Travelers often paused beside them, imagining how ancient peoples had collected rainwater, prepared offerings, or maintained sacred spaces. These details reminded visitors that the temples were not only spiritual centers, but also feats of engineering, blending utility with devotion and artistry. Seasons dictated the character of the ruins. Summer heat made the marble gleam, emphasizing endurance and permanence, while the shadows provided welcome relief. Autumn leaves painted the ground in warm colors, softening the edges of broken stone and suggesting reflection and transition. Winter frost and snow contrasted sharply with darkened cracks, teaching resilience and patience. Spring, with its renewal of color and life, reminded travelers that even in enduring structures, growth and change persisted. Each season offered a distinct lesson, reinforcing the temple's role as teachers of observation and patience. Legends continued to circulate in villages near the temples. Elders recounted stories of travelers receiving visions in dreams, of small lights appearing where none should exist, or of mysterious warmth felt near certain stones. Children listened with fascination, absorbing the reverence embedded in these tales. Travelers often recalled such stories as they explored, noticing subtle phenomena that seemed to align with local lore. A particular wind shifting, a shadow falling in a curious way, or a faint scent lingering unexpectedly. Whether coincidence or magic, these experiences deepened the sense of the temples as spaces where the ordinary and extraordinary intertwined. Artists were drawn to the ruins for centuries. Painters sought the shifting light. Sculptors studied broken columns for form and proportion, and poets found inspiration in shadow, stone, and silence. No canvas or verse could fully capture the essence of the temples, yet each attempt honored their presence and contributed to the ongoing dialogue between past and present. Visitors often left sketches, poems, or journals, small contributions to the continuum of human engagement with these spaces. Nightfall brought subtle transformations. The ruins, softened by darkness, seemed to exhale, releasing the heat of the day and inviting reflection. Stars emerged above, their light reflected faintly on pale marble. Owls called softly, small mammals moved unseen, and the gentle wind carried whispers of trees and leaves. Travelers who stayed late often found themselves contemplating time, presence, and endurance, sensing the weight of centuries in the cool night air. Even in silence, the ruins communicated lessons of patience, observation, and continuity. Travelers sometimes revisited ruins repeatedly, seeking new insights at different times of day or year. Each visit revealed fresh details: sunlight catching a carving, a hidden bloom, a breeze stirring leaves in a particular pattern. These repeated observations built layers of understanding, emphasizing the temple's dynamic nature. The ruins were not frozen in time. They responded subtly to light, wind, and presence, offering lessons to those who approached with care. Paths to the temples held stories of their own, worn by centuries of footsteps, shaped by erosion, and guided by natural features. They carried travelers through a landscape alive with history. Walking these paths demanded attention and patience, and those who did often discovered new perspectives, hidden features, or unexpected views of the ruins. In this way, the journey itself became part of the experience, teaching mindfulness and reverence alongside the direct observation of stone and shadow. And so, the sleeping temples of Greece continued to endure. Their columns, walls, and fragments carried memory, artistry, and devotion. Travelers, scholars, poets, and villagers all contributed subtly to the ongoing dream, participating in a continuum that linked centuries of human activity with the timeless presence of stone. These ruins required nothing, yet offered everything: reflection, patience, perspective, and a quiet understanding of time's passage. If you have journeyed this far, allow the calm, patience, and subtle presence of the temples to linger with you. Let it guide your observation, your thought, and your attention to the small wonders of life. And if this exploration has inspired you, remember to like and subscribe, so that others may wander alongside us through the timeless dreaming of stone. The morning sun filtered softly through the trees, casting dappled light across fallen columns and fractured walls. Travelers who arrived early felt a sense of intimacy, as if the ruins were opening themselves to those patient enough to notice. Every crack in the marble, every edge of worn stone, revealed subtle detail, traces of ancient carvings, faint inscriptions, and patterns left by tools long forgotten. In these quiet spaces, imagination flourished, bridging the centuries between builder and observer. Paths meandered gently through olive groves and rocky slopes, guiding travelers along contours shaped both by nature and human hands. The steps themselves told stories. Worn edges suggested centuries of footsteps, occasional chips hinted at the care, or carelessness, of past visitors, and subtle grooves revealed patterns in human movement over generations. Those who walked slowly could feel the weight of history beneath their feet, each step a meditation on the passage of time. Birdsong filled the air, blending with the whisper of the wind and the subtle rustle of leaves. Travelers paused frequently, absorbing sound as carefully as sight. Each note, each movement of air contributed to the living tapestry surrounding the temples. Insects flitted among wildflowers that had taken root between stones, bees moving industriously from bloom to bloom. Even in apparent stillness, the ruins teemed with subtle life, demonstrating the persistence of nature alongside enduring architecture. Columns, even those fractured and leaning, retained a quiet majesty. Travelers often stood beneath them, tilting their heads to follow the lines toward the sky. Sunlight emphasized textures invisible from afar, illuminating carvings, etchings, and traces of paint long faded. The contrast between shadows and light revealed a dynamic interplay, teaching observation and patience. Every column seemed to tell multiple stories simultaneously, of craftsmanship, of worship, and of survival through centuries of wind, rain, and neglect. Hidden corners held secrets. Small alcoves or recesses sometimes contained fragments of reliefs, inscriptions, or traces of ritual activity. Travelers discovered these spaces with a sense of awe, as if peering into the private life of the temple itself. Even a chipped edge or a faint marking became a point of fascination, a portal into a long-forgotten past. Each observation reinforced the sense that the ruins were alive with memory, quietly guiding those willing to notice. Water sources, once central to temple activity, offered both practical and symbolic lessons. Ancient cisterns, channels, and basins suggested careful planning and ingenuity. Travelers imagined priests or worshippers collecting water, performing rituals, or offering thanks, connecting practical life to spiritual devotion. Even when dry, these features conveyed a sense of care, structure, and patience, illustrating the integration of human effort into sacred spaces. Seasons shaped the experience of the ruins dramatically. Spring brought renewal and growth, coloring pale stone with green and blossoms. Summer emphasized endurance under bright sun, teaching resilience. Autumn's golden leaves softened harsh edges, creating spaces for reflection and contemplation. Winter frost and snow added contrast, demonstrating survival through hardship. Travelers noticed these shifts, learning from the temple's quiet adaptation to the rhythms of the natural world. Legends persisted among nearby villagers, stories of faint lights at twilight, dreams inspired by wandering among the ruins, or whispers carried on the wind reinforced the sacred aura of the temples. Children listened attentively, and travelers often recalled these tales as they explored, noticing small phenomena that seemed to align with the stories. Whether coincidence, imagination, or lingering presence, these experiences deepened appreciation and reverence for the ruins. Artists continued to seek inspiration among the stones. Painters followed the shifting light to capture subtle textures and shadows. Sculptors studied broken columns to understand form and proportion, and poets reflected on silence, stone, and time. Though no single creation could fully capture the essence of the temples, each attempt became part of the continuum of engagement, honoring the ruins' enduring presence. Travelers frequently left journals, sketches, or poems, contributing their own layer to the ongoing dream of the temples. Nightfall transformed the ruins once again. Shadows deepened, creating new shapes and revealing details missed in daylight. Owls called across open spaces, while small mammals moved quietly beneath the stone. Stars emerged overhead, their faint reflection visible on marble surfaces. The wind carried gentle whispers through columns, rustling leaves and completing the symphony of night. Travelers who lingered felt the weight of centuries, sensing a presence older and more patient than themselves. Repeated visits rewarded patient travelers. Different times of day, changing seasons, and subtle shifts in light and wind offered fresh perspectives. Each visit revealed new details: a previously unnoticed carving, a delicate bloom in a crack, a faint sound carried by the breeze. The temples, though silent, responded dynamically, offering lessons in attention, observation, and presence. They encouraged engagement, not through instruction, but through the subtle invitation of detail and discovery. Paths connecting the temples to surrounding villages carried their own stories. Shaped by generations of footsteps, weather, and natural erosion, they guided travelers through landscapes rich in memory. Moving slowly along these paths required mindfulness, turning each journey into a lesson in patience and careful observation. Travelers often found themselves reflecting on the interconnectedness of movement, space, and experience, recognizing that the journey itself was as important as the destination. Even broken and fallen stones carried significance. Each fracture, chip, or discoloration hinted at centuries of weather, human activity, and natural processes. Travelers noticed how cracks guided patterns of plant growth, how shadows emphasized reliefs, and how subtle angles influenced perception of light. Even fragments contributed to the larger narrative of endurance, memory, and quiet majesty, offering insight into both the physical and spiritual dimensions of the temples. The ruins' subtle teachings extended beyond the immediate space. Travelers carried lessons in patience, observation, and presence into daily life. A slowed step, attentive listening, and quiet reflection became natural extensions of experiences among the temples. The enduring stones acted as guides, offering a model for living with care, attention, and respect for both nature and human history. And so, the sleeping temples of Greece persisted, patient and enduring, teaching through presence rather than proclamation. Stone after stone, shadow after shadow, bloom after bloom, they carried memory, artistry, and quiet life. Travelers, scholars, poets, and villagers alike contributed subtly to the ongoing dream, maintaining the rhythm of centuries while engaging in their own reflections. The temples required nothing, yet offered insight, calm, and a profound sense of connection to the past. If you have journeyed this far through their quiet world, carry the lessons of patience, observation, and enduring beauty with you. And if this exploration of the dreaming temples has inspired reflection, don't forget to like and subscribe so others may wander with us through the timeless whispers of stone and memory. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the ruins revealed their intricate relationship with light and shadow. Travelers moving among the columns noticed how sunlight accentuated textures invisible in dimmer hours. Every carving, every groove became more vivid, revealing subtle artistry crafted centuries ago. Even broken edges held beauty, catching glints of light and offering glimpses of the original grandeur. Observers often paused, letting their eyes and minds absorb the quiet majesty, realizing that every detail contributed to the temple's enduring presence. Paths leading through the temples wound gently, sometimes narrowing between leaning columns, other times opening onto expansive courtyards where sunlight poured freely. Travelers adjusted their pace, attuning to the rhythm of the land and stone. The act of walking itself became a form of meditation. Each step demanded attention, and each pause offered observation. Even children, who often moved with curiosity and spontaneity, learned unconsciously to navigate with care, respecting both the fragility and history of the ruins. Nature intertwined seamlessly with human construction. Vines crept along walls, roots penetrated cracks, and small plants flourished in unlikely corners. Insects buzzed among blossoms, and birds nested in hollows, their activity blending with the quiet rhythm of the stones. Travelers who observed these interactions often felt a sense of continuity, seeing life and endurance working together across centuries. The ruins were not lifeless relics. They were dynamic participants in an ongoing cycle of observation, memory, and coexistence. Columns carried subtle narratives. Faint carvings, weathered reliefs, and inscriptions hinted at rituals, deities, and human devotion. Travelers traced lines with fingers, careful not to disturb the marble, and allowed imagination to reconstruct long-forgotten scenes. Priests walking through these spaces, offerings held in reverent hands, the murmurs of worshippers, all emerged vividly in the mind's eye. Even fragmentary elements sparked reflection, demonstrating the power of suggestion and the enduring capacity of stone to communicate across centuries. The seasons transformed the ruins profoundly. Spring brought renewal, colors of green and bursts of flowers painting the ancient stone. Summer emphasized endurance, as travelers felt the warmth of the sun absorbed and reflected by marble surfaces. Autumn softened edges with falling leaves, offering moments for quiet reflection, while winter's frost and snow contrasted sharply with darkened stone, teaching patience and resilience. Each season imparted unique lessons, reinforcing the temple's subtle guidance for mindful observation and respect. Nearby villages maintained quiet traditions that honored the ruins. Offerings of herbs, small tokens, or moments of silence allowed villagers to engage directly with the enduring memory of the temples. These practices were not formal rituals, but gestures of respect and remembrance. Travelers often observed or participated, discovering that such small acts of acknowledgement deepened the sense of connection with the space. Even in absence of formal worship, reverence remained alive, bridging centuries through human attention and care. Legends enriched the experience further. Villagers spoke of fleeting lights at dusk, dreams inspired by wandering through the ruins, or whispers carried on wind across courtyards. Travelers found themselves noticing small phenomena that mirrored these stories. A gust of wind lifting a leaf in a particular pattern, a shadow forming briefly in a niche, or a faint warmth where sunlight caught stone. These subtle occurrences reinforced the sense that the temples were living presences, interacting with the attentive observer in ways both tangible and mysterious. Artists continued to be drawn to the ruins. Painters followed shifting sunlight to capture subtle textures. Sculptors studied broken columns to understand proportion and technique. And poets meditated on the interplay of shadow, stone, and silence. Even when no single work could fully encapsulate the essence of the temples, each creative effort honored their presence and added to the ongoing human dialogue with the ruins. Travelers left their sketches, writings, and reflections, contributing quietly to the collective memory preserved within the stones. Night brought a profound transformation. Moonlight cast silvery hues over marble surfaces, elongating shadows and highlighting details unseen in daylight. Owls called softly from distant trees, and small mammals scurried through shaded hollows. Stars twinkled overhead, reflected faintly on columns and broken steps. The wind whispered, carrying sounds of leaves, distant wildlife, and subtle echoes of history. Travelers who lingered in this nocturnal atmosphere often experienced heightened awareness, sensing the centuries layered in silence and shadow. Repeated visits revealed new dimensions. Different times of day, shifting seasons, and subtle changes in wind or light offered fresh perspectives on familiar stones. Travelers noticed previously overlooked carvings, hidden blooms, or acoustic phenomena such as whispers carried through columns. These experiences underscored the dynamic nature of the ruins, demonstrating that attention and presence could reveal details that were always there but required mindfulness to perceive. Paths connecting the temples to surrounding landscapes carried their own stories. Erosion, centuries of footsteps, and careful alignment with natural features created a journey as rich as the ruins themselves. Travelers moved deliberately, noting contours, textures, and subtle shifts in elevation. Walking became a meditative act, reinforcing lessons of patience, awareness, and respect learned within the temples. The journey itself became part of the holistic experience, linking human movement to the timeless presence of stone. Even fragments contributed to the larger narrative. Broken columns, chipped steps, and fractured reliefs reflected resilience, adaptation, and the enduring memory of craftsmanship. Observing these fragments prompted reflection on the passage of time, impermanence, and continuity. Travelers discovered that even in incompleteness, the ruins conveyed meaning and beauty, teaching that persistence and presence often mattered more than perfection. The ruins' lessons extended beyond immediate observation. Travelers carried insights into their own lives, the value of patience, the importance of attentive observation, and the significance of quiet endurance. Subtle patterns of light and shadow, interactions of stone and nature, and the interplay of history and imagination offered guidance in mindful living. Even those visiting briefly found their perceptions altered, leaving with a sense of calm, reflection, and expanded awareness. Thus, the sleeping temples of Greece endured, patient and steadfast. Column after column, shadow after shadow, bloom after bloom, they carried memory, artistry, and quiet life. Travelers, scholars, poets, and villagers alike participated in the ongoing dream, adding subtle layers of observation and reverence. These ruins required nothing yet offered insight, presence, and connection across time. If you have journeyed this far into the dreaming temples, allow their calm, patience, and enduring beauty to remain with you. And if you've enjoyed this passage through their quiet, timeless world, remember to like and subscribe so that others may wander alongside us through the whispers of stone, shadow, and memory. Morning light returned, gentle and diffuse, illuminating the temples in a calm glow. Travelers moving along the worn paths noticed subtle shifts in texture and color. Every fissure, every etched mark in stone became visible under this soft illumination, revealing artistry and detail invisible at other times. Observers felt a quiet awe, sensing centuries of human effort and devotion captured in each fragment, and recognized that the temple's lessons were not in grand gestures, but in patient attention to detail. The wind moved through the ruins with a careful rhythm, stirring leaves and carrying faint scents of herbs, wildflowers, and distant groves. It whispered across columns, producing subtle sounds that travelers found strangely musical. Occasionally, the breeze shifted to reveal a hidden nook or highlight a previously overlooked carving. Travelers often paused, letting the air guide their perception and enhance their awareness of both the physical and spiritual dimensions of the space. Small animals contributed to the living rhythm of the ruins. Birds nested in hollows, bees navigated the tiny blooms between stones, and foxes or hedgehogs moved quietly through shadowed recesses. Their presence emphasized continuity, demonstrating how life thrived alongside the enduring stone. Travelers observed these interactions with fascination, recognizing that even in decay, vitality persisted, and that the ruins were part of a dynamic ecosystem rather than static relics. Columns, broken yet enduring, retained silent authority. Travelers stood beneath them, tilting heads to follow lines upward towards sky and sunlight. Light played across textures, emphasizing carving details and subtle traces of paint long faded. Even in ruin, columns conveyed lessons of balance, endurance, and meticulous craftsmanship. Observers often reflected on the patience and skill required to construct and maintain such spaces, appreciating the intersection of artistry, devotion, and physical effort. Hidden alcoves and corners revealed fragments of past activity. Carvings, inscriptions, and traces of ritual hinted at the lives of priests, worshippers, and artisans. Travelers imagined long-gone ceremonies, offerings placed carefully, chants echoing across stone, silent contemplation in shadowed recesses. Even incomplete or eroded details sparked curiosity and reflection, highlighting the enduring power of suggestion and the ability of stone to carry memory across centuries. Water features remained in some areas. Cisterns, basins, and channels, though often dry, demonstrated careful planning and practical ingenuity. Travelers reflected on the importance of water in daily life and ritual, imagining ancient practices and the care involved in sustaining sacred spaces. These functional features reinforced lessons in balance, preparation, and connection between physical need and spiritual expression. Seasonal changes transformed the experience of the ruins dramatically. Spring brought fresh growth and color, painting pale stone with green and blooms. Summer emphasized endurance under bright sun, while autumn softened edges with golden leaves. Winter's frost and snow contrasted sharply with the darkened stone, teaching resilience and patience. Observers discovered that each season offered unique insights, emphasizing adaptability, continuity, and the interplay between permanence and change. Local legends continued to enrich the experience. Villagers spoke of faint lights appearing at dusk, dreams inspired by wandering among the ruins, or subtle sounds carried on the wind. Travelers often noticed minor coincidences that echoed these tales: a shift in wind, a play of shadow, or a faint scent, reinforcing the sense that the temples remained responsive, engaging, and alive in subtle ways. These stories, passed down through generations, preserved the spiritual aura and cultural memory of the ruins. Artists still found inspiration in every detail. Painters captured shifting light and shadow, sculptors examined broken columns to understand form, and poets reflected on silence, stone, and enduring presence. Though no creation could fully encapsulate the essence of the temples, each attempt contributed to a dialogue spanning centuries. Travelers left journals, sketches, and reflections, adding to the collective memory maintained by the stones themselves. Nightfall brought subtle transformations. Moonlight illuminated columns, elongating shadows and revealing previously hidden reliefs. Owls called softly, small mammals moved unseen, and stars shimmered above, their reflection faintly visible on marble surfaces. Wind whispered gently through broken columns, rustling leaves and carrying faint echoes of history. Travelers who lingered experienced heightened awareness, sensing centuries layered into silence and shadow. Returning visitors noticed differences with every encounter. Changing light, seasonal shifts, and subtle movements in flora and fauna offered new perspectives. Previously overlooked carvings, blooms, or acoustic phenomena became apparent, demonstrating the dynamic nature of the ruins. Observation required patience, and attentive travelers discovered that the temples responded subtly, rewarding mindfulness and engagement. Paths connecting the temples to surrounding landscapes carried stories etched by generations of footsteps, erosion, and human activity. Travelers moved deliberately, noticing contours, textures, and subtle changes in elevation. The journey itself became a lesson in patience, awareness, and respect. Moving mindfully along these paths deepened appreciation for the interaction between humans, nature, and enduring stone. Even fragments of columns or statues retained significance. Chipped edges, worn surfaces, and faint etchings reflected centuries of weather, human contact, and natural processes. Travelers noticed how cracks guided plant growth, how light emphasized forms, and how shadow shifted perception. Even incomplete features communicated meaning and beauty, teaching that resilience, attention, and subtlety often mattered more than perfection. Lessons extended beyond observation. Travelers applied insights in daily life. Patient attention, careful listening, and mindful presence became natural extensions of experiences among the ruins. Light, shadow, and texture taught subtlety. Endurance and coexistence demonstrated harmony. Quiet attention revealed hidden beauty. The temples provided guidance not through instruction but through example, emphasizing observation, respect, and connection to both nature and history. Thus, the sleeping temples of Greece endured, patient and steadfast. Column after column, shadow after shadow, bloom after bloom, they carried memory, artistry, and quiet life. Travelers, scholars, poets, and villagers all contributed subtly to the ongoing dream, maintaining the rhythm of centuries while engaging in personal reflection. The ruins required nothing, yet offered insight, presence, and connection across time. If you have followed this journey this far, carry the calm, patience, and enduring beauty of the temples with you. And if you have enjoyed this exploration of their quiet, timeless world, remember to like and subscribe, so others may wander alongside us through the whispers of stone, shadow, and memory. Dawn arrived quietly, illuminating the ruins with a pale, gentle light. Travelers moving along the worn stone paths noticed the subtle interplay of color, texture, and shadow, as if the temples themselves guided attention. Every crack, every carved groove became a lesson in observation. The faint traces of paint, weathered by centuries, hinted at former vibrancy, showing how care and detail had once transformed the stones into living art. Travelers felt compelled to move slowly, absorbing each nuance and recognizing that patience revealed meaning where haste obscured it. The wind carried soft scents of wild herbs, olive groves, and distant pine. It whispered across broken columns, creating subtle sounds that felt almost musical. Occasionally, it shifted, revealing hidden corners or emphasizing previously unnoticed carvings. Travelers often paused, letting the wind shape perception and draw attention to elements they might otherwise have missed. In these moments, observation and presence merged, reinforcing the idea that the temples were not merely physical spaces but guides to a deeper awareness of time, space, and attention. Wildlife animated the ruins in quiet ways. Birds nested in column hollows, bees hovered over tiny blooms, and small mammals scuttled along shadowed paths. Observing these creatures, travelers gained a sense of continuity. Life thrived alongside the enduring stone, demonstrating resilience and coexistence. The ruins were not static. They were living ecosystems in which human history, nature, and time intertwined. Awareness of this ongoing interaction enriched the visitor's experience, teaching attentiveness and respect. Columns, fractured yet commanding, remained silent teachers. Travelers stood beneath them, tracing lines upward toward the sky, noting how light emphasized intricate carvings and textures. Even damaged sections conveyed lessons about balance, resilience, and human skill. Observers reflected on the meticulous effort required to construct and maintain such spaces, recognizing that artistry and devotion had endured centuries of erosion, conflict, and neglect. These observations reinforced a sense of connection to the builders, intent, and their careful engagement with both nature and divine inspiration. Hidden alcoves and recessed spaces revealed stories frozen in stone. Faded carvings, inscriptions, and remnants of ritual objects suggested lives once entwined with these temples. Travelers imagined priests performing ceremonies, offerings being placed with reverence, and worshippers engaging in quiet meditation. Even fragments carried significance, as the human mind filled gaps with imagination, bridging centuries with thought and reflection. These spaces taught attention to subtlety, reminding visitors that meaning often lies in details overlooked by casual observation. Water systems, though mostly dry now, hinted at ancient ingenuity. Channels, basins, and cisterns reflected careful planning and connection between practical need and spiritual practice. Travelers imagined rituals involving water, cleansing, offerings, or quiet reflection, and considered the discipline required to maintain such systems. These remnants taught lessons in preparation, mindfulness, and the integration of daily life with sacred spaces, demonstrating how practical action could embody spiritual intention. Seasons shaped the temple's character profoundly. Spring painted stone with green growth and vibrant blooms, emphasizing renewal. Summer illuminated endurance under bright sun, while autumn softened edges with golden leaves, prompting reflection. Winter introduced frost and snow, testing resilience and patience. Travelers observed that each season offered distinct insights, reinforcing adaptability, continuity, and the dialogue between permanence and change. The ruins, therefore, taught that presence and observation could transform experience, turning every visit into a unique exploration. Local legends enriched these encounters. Villagers spoke of lights appearing at twilight, dreams inspired by wandering among the ruins, and faint whispers carried on the wind. Travelers frequently noted phenomena that echoed these tales: shadows moving in unexpected ways, breezes stirring in patterns, or a fleeting warmth near stone surfaces. Whether coincidence or subtle presence, these experiences heightened a sense of wonder, bridging imagination with observation and reinforcing the spiritual resonance embedded in the ruins. Artists continued to seek inspiration. Painters traced subtle shadows, sculptors studied broken columns for proportion, and poets reflected on silence, time, and stone. Even if no work could fully capture the essence of the temples, each attempt became part of an ongoing dialogue between humans and ruins. Travelers contributed as well, leaving sketches, writings, or reflections, adding layers to the collective memory preserved in the stones. Each contribution became a quiet acknowledgement of the enduring presence and wisdom of the temples. Nightfall brought dramatic transformations. Moonlight cast silver hues over marble surfaces, elongating shadows and highlighting textures invisible by day. Owls called softly, small mammals moved silently, and stars glimmered above, mirrored faintly on stone surfaces. Gentle breezes whispered through columns, rustling leaves and carrying subtle echoes of centuries past. Travelers who lingered experienced heightened awareness, sensing the layering of time, memory, and observation. Silence itself became instructive, revealing dimensions of presence and endurance that daylight obscured. Repeated visits revealed further dimensions. Different hours, changing seasons, and subtle environmental shifts offered new perspectives on familiar stones. Previously unnoticed carvings, tiny blooms, or acoustic nuances became apparent, illustrating the dynamic nature of the ruins. Travelers learned that observation required patience and attention. The temples rewarded those who engaged fully, offering continuous lessons in presence, reflection, and awareness. Paths connecting the temples to surrounding villages added to the holistic experience. Worn by centuries of footsteps, shaped by natural erosion, and guided by careful alignment with the landscape, these paths encouraged mindful walking. Travelers noticed contours, textures, and subtle shifts, realizing the journey itself was a lesson in patience and respect. Observing the path, like observing the ruins, required attention to detail, awareness of change, and acknowledgement of continuity between human and natural forces. Even fragments of columns, steps, and statues held meaning. Chips, fissures, and faint inscriptions reflected centuries of weathering, human contact, and natural evolution. Observers noted patterns, light highlighting edges, shadows emphasizing depth, cracks guiding plant growth. These fragments demonstrated that even in incompleteness, presence, beauty, and instruction persisted. Travelers reflected on resilience, continuity, and the enduring power of careful attention, learning to perceive significance in imperfection. The temple's lessons extended beyond physical observation. Travelers carried insights into daily life. Patience, mindfulness, and attentive presence became natural extensions of their experience. Subtle patterns of light and shadow, the interaction of stone and nature, and the interplay of history and imagination guided perception, behavior, and reflection. The temples provided instruction not through explicit teaching, but through the subtle engagement of observation, awareness, and connection to enduring forms. Thus, the sleeping temples of Greece persisted, patient, enduring, and profound. Column after column, shadow after shadow, bloom after bloom, they carried memory, artistry, and quiet life. Travelers, scholars, poets, and villagers all contributed to the ongoing dream, adding layers of reflection, reverence, and perception. These ruins required nothing yet offered insight, presence, and connection across time. If you have followed this journey through their quiet, timeless world, let the patience, observation, and enduring beauty of the temples remain with you. And if you've enjoyed this exploration of their whispers and dreams, remember to like and subscribe so others may walk alongside us through the silent living history of stone. The early light revealed new details each morning. Travelers walking through the ruins noticed the delicate interplay of shadow and stone, subtle textures that became more apparent with gentle illumination. Every groove, chip, and etching told a story of careful labor and devotion preserved across centuries. Even the fractured stones, once part of grand structures, retained quiet dignity, teaching observers that history and beauty often lie in imperfection and endurance rather than flawless completion. Wind moved through the ruins with a deliberate rhythm, stirring leaves and carrying faint scents of herbs, olive trees, and distant groves. Occasionally, it highlighted details that had gone unnoticed: a carved inscription, a hidden alcove, or a tiny flower pushing through a crack. Travelers paused to absorb these moments, learning that observation required attentiveness and patience. Subtle interaction with the environment deepened the sense that the temples were living spaces, teaching through presence rather than spoken instruction. Wildlife added to the quiet rhythm of the ruins. Birds nested within hollowed columns, bees hovered over small blossoms, and foxes or small mammals moved discreetly through shadowed areas. These encounters reminded travelers that the ruins were not static relics. They were part of a living ecosystem where human history and natural life coexisted. Awareness of this interconnectedness reinforced respect for both the ruins and the surrounding environment, and encouraged travelers to approach observation with patience and care. Columns, though fractured and worn, retained authority. Travelers often tilted their heads to follow the lines skyward, noting how sunlight accentuated textures and carvings. Even damaged edges conveyed lessons of balance, resilience, and skilled craftsmanship. Observers reflected on the meticulous effort required to create and maintain such spaces, appreciating the intersection of artistry, devotion, and human endeavor that allowed these temples to endure despite centuries of exposure. Hidden alcoves and recesses revealed traces of ancient ritual life. Faded inscriptions, small reliefs, and remnants of offerings suggested activities once carried out in devotion and contemplation. Travelers imagined priests performing ceremonies, worshippers placing tokens, and moments of quiet reflection filling these spaces. Even the smallest fragment invited imagination, showing that meaning often lies in subtlety. The temples emphasized that attentive observation could bridge centuries, allowing visitors to connect with the lives and intentions of those long gone. Water features, though often dry, reflected sophisticated planning. Channels, basins, and cisterns demonstrated integration of practical and spiritual concerns. Travelers considered the care required to maintain these systems, imagining rituals of cleansing or offering performed centuries before. Even the remnants provided lessons in harmony, patience, and the blending of daily life with spiritual purpose, reinforcing the idea that devotion extended beyond ceremony into mindful maintenance of space. Seasons brought continual transformation. Spring infused the ruins with color and renewal. Summer emphasized endurance under bright sunlight. Autumn softened edges with golden leaves, and winter introduced frost and snow, testing patience and resilience. Travelers observed that each season offered a distinct experience and unique insight, underscoring the temple's dynamic relationship with nature and the continuous opportunity for observation and reflection that they provided. Local stories and folklore deepened the experience. Villagers told of faint lights appearing at dusk, dreams inspired by wandering among ruins, or whispered voices carried on the wind. Travelers often noticed small phenomena that seemed to echo these tales. Shadows forming unexpectedly, subtle shifts in wind or light, or fleeting warmth near stone surfaces. Whether coincidence or subtle presence, these experiences enhanced wonder and reverence, reinforcing the sense that the temples were active participants in memory, imagination, and perception. Artists continued to be drawn to the temples. Painters sought out fleeting patterns of light and shadow. Sculptors examined broken columns for proportion, and poets reflected on silence, stone, and endurance. Even when no single creation could capture the full essence of the ruins, each contribution honored their presence. Travelers often left journals, sketches, or poems, adding layers to the collective memory and ensuring that each visitor's observation became part of an ongoing dialogue with the temples. Nightfall brought subtle yet profound changes. Moonlight cast silver hues across the marble, elongating shadows and revealing textures hidden by daylight. Owls called, insects whispered, and small mammals moved quietly through the ruins. Stars appeared overhead, mirrored faintly in the smooth surfaces of columns and steps. The gentle night breeze rustled leaves and stirred hidden corners, creating a symphony of sound, movement, and shadow. Travelers lingering in this quiet felt the weight of centuries, sensing layers of memory and the ongoing dialogue between stone, nature, and human presence. Repeated visits revealed new insights. Different times of day, shifts in season, and subtle environmental changes offered fresh perspectives on familiar stones. A previously unnoticed carving, a tiny flower emerging from a crack, or a unique sound pattern might appear, demonstrating that careful observation was rewarded. Travelers learned that the temples offered continuous instruction for those patient and attentive enough to notice, teaching lessons about perception, continuity, and reverence. Paths connecting the temples to surrounding landscapes carried significance. Shaped by centuries of footsteps, weather, and careful alignment with natural features, they guided travelers in mindful motion. Every contour, elevation, and texture underfoot invited careful attention. Walking became an act of meditation, emphasizing the journey as much as the destination. Observation of the path reinforced awareness of human interaction with landscape and stone, demonstrating that travel itself could be a contemplative, reflective practice. Even fragments of the temples retained meaning. Broken columns, worn steps, and fractured statues reflected centuries of exposure, human contact, and natural evolution. Travelers noted subtle patterns, light emphasizing edges, shadows creating new forms, cracks guiding plant growth. These fragments demonstrated that beauty and insight persisted even in imperfection. Reflection on these details taught lessons of resilience, continuity, and the power of attentive observation. The teachings of the temples extended beyond mere observation. Travelers carried insights into daily life, incorporating patience, mindfulness, and careful attention into their routines. The interplay of light and shadow, stone and nature, history and imagination, all offered guidance in perception, behavior, and reflection. The temples instructed without words, modeling engagement, awareness, and reverence that could be applied to life beyond their walls. Thus, the sleeping temples of Greece endured. Column after column, shadow after shadow, bloom after bloom, they carried artistry, memory, and quiet vitality. Travelers, poets, scholars, and villagers all contributed to the ongoing dream, layering observation, reflection, and reverence upon enduring stone. The temples required nothing yet offered insight, calm, and connection across time. If you have wandered through these ancient stones this far, let the lessons of patience, observation, and mindful presence remain with you. And if you have enjoyed this exploration of the timeless temples, remember to like and subscribe, so others may experience the whispers of stone, shadow, and memory alongside us. The first light of morning touched the ruins with a gentle glow, revealing the subtle beauty of textures, cracks, and carvings. Travelers moving through the space noticed details that had gone unseen at other times. Faint traces of paint, the uneven surfaces of chiseled stone, and the delicate erosion patterns created by centuries of wind and rain. Even broken fragments retained dignity, each telling a story of endurance and devotion. Observers learned that patience and attention revealed richness hidden from casual glance. Wind moved softly through the ruins, stirring leaves and carrying faint scents of wild herbs and distant groves. It highlighted subtle features. A hidden carving, a tiny blossom emerging from a crevice, or a shadow shifting across stone. Travelers paused, allowing the movement of air to guide their perception, understanding that observation required not only sight, but attentiveness to nuance. The ruins encouraged slow, deliberate engagement, teaching that presence itself revealed meaning. Wildlife animated the temples in quiet ways. Birds nested in column hollows, bees hovered over delicate blooms, and small mammals moved discreetly through shaded corners. Observers realized that the ruins were not merely historical artifacts, but living systems in which human construction and natural life coexisted. Awareness of this balance deepened respect, reinforcing lessons in patience, observation, and reverence for both nature and history. Columns, fractured and weathered, remained silent teachers. Travelers often tilted their heads to follow lines upward, noting how light played across textures and carvings. Even broken edges communicated resilience, balance, and careful craftsmanship. Observers reflected on the skill and devotion required to construct these spaces, appreciating the intersection of artistry, patience, and human intention that allowed the temples to endure across centuries. Hidden alcoves offered glimpses into ancient rituals. Small recesses contained faded inscriptions, fragmented reliefs, and traces of offerings, suggesting ceremonial activities performed long ago. Travelers imagined priests moving with reverence, worshippers placing tokens, and quiet meditation filling the spaces. Even the smallest fragment invited reflection, demonstrating that meaning often resides in subtlety. Observation allowed visitors to bridge time, connecting with the lives and intentions of those who once inhabited these sacred spaces. Water features, though largely dry, demonstrated careful planning. Channels, basins, and cisterns integrated practical needs with spiritual intention. Travelers imagined rituals of cleansing or offering performed centuries before, appreciating the discipline required to maintain these systems. These remnants offered lessons in balance, mindfulness, and the integration of daily life with sacred practice, illustrating that devotion extended into care for the environment. Seasonal shifts transformed the ruins continually. Spring brought color and renewal. Summer emphasized endurance under bright sunlight. Autumn softened edges with golden leaves, and winter added frost and snow, testing patience and resilience. Travelers observed that each season provided unique insights, emphasizing adaptability, continuity, and the interaction between permanence and change. The temples taught that attentive presence could reveal subtle beauty across every condition. Local legends enriched experience further. Villagers spoke of lights appearing at dusk, dreams inspired by wandering among ruins, or whispers carried on the wind. Travelers often noticed phenomena that echoed these tales. Shadows forming unexpectedly, gusts of wind moving leaves in strange patterns, or a fleeting warmth near the stone. Whether coincidence or lingering presence, these experiences amplified wonder and reverence, suggesting that the temples actively engaged the attentive observer. Artists continued to be inspired. Painters captured transient patterns of light and shadow. Sculptors studied broken columns to understand proportion, and poets reflected on silence, stone, and time. No single creation could fully convey the essence of the temples, yet every effort contributed to a dialogue spanning centuries. Travelers, too, left sketches, reflections, or journals, adding layers to the collective memory maintained by the ruins. Each contribution acknowledged the enduring presence of these sacred stones. Nightfall transformed the temples in profound ways. Moonlight cast silver highlights across marble, elongating shadows and revealing details invisible in daylight. Owls called softly, insects whispered, and small mammals moved unseen beneath the stones. Stars shimmered above, mirrored faintly in marble surfaces. Gentle wind rustled leaves and stirred hidden corners, creating a symphony of subtle sound and motion. Travelers lingering at night sensed centuries layered in silence, perceiving the quiet dialogue between stone, nature, and human memory. Repeated visits revealed new dimensions. Changing light, seasonal variations, and subtle environmental shifts offered fresh perspectives on familiar features. A previously unnoticed carving, a tiny blossom, or an acoustic quirk emerged unexpectedly, demonstrating that careful observation was rewarded. Travelers learned that the temples offered continual instruction to those willing to engage fully, teaching patience, perception, and reverence through experience. Paths connecting the temples to surrounding landscapes carried their own stories. Shaped by centuries of footsteps, erosion, and careful alignment with natural features, they guided travelers in mindful movement. Every contour, every shift in elevation, and every texture underfoot invited attentive navigation. Walking became a contemplative act, emphasizing the journey as much as the destination. Observation along the path deepened awareness of the interplay between human presence, landscape, and enduring stone. Fragments of columns, steps, and statues retained profound significance. Chips, fissures, and faint inscriptions reflected centuries of weather, human interaction, and natural evolution. Travelers noticed patterns, light emphasizing edges, shadows creating new forms, cracks guiding plant growth. These fragments demonstrated that beauty, insight, and instruction persisted even in incompleteness. Reflection on these details reinforced lessons of resilience, continuity, and the importance of attentive observation. The teachings of the temples extended beyond immediate observation. Travelers incorporated insights into daily life. Patience, careful listening, and mindful attention became natural extensions of experience. The interplay of light and shadow, stone and nature, history and imagination provided subtle guidance, modeling engagement, awareness, and reverence that could be applied beyond the ruins themselves. Thus, the sleeping temples of Greece persisted, enduring, patient, and profound. Column after column, shadow after shadow, bloom after bloom, they carried artistry, memory, and quiet vitality. Travelers, poets, scholars, and villagers all contributed to the ongoing dream, layering observation, reflection, and reverence upon enduring stone. The temples required nothing, yet offered insight, calm, and connection across centuries. If you have journeyed this far through the temples, carry their lessons of patience, observation, and mindful presence with you. And if this exploration of timeless stone and enduring memory has inspired you, don't forget to like and subscribe, so others may wander alongside us through the whispers of shadow, stone, and quiet reflection. The early morning sun cast a soft golden glow across the ruins, revealing the subtle details etched into each column, step, and stone. Travelers moved carefully through the temples, noticing the play of light and shadow on the weathered surfaces. Every crack, every faint groove told a story of patient labor and devotion, a narrative carved into stone centuries ago. Even the broken fragments retained dignity, teaching that history and beauty often endure in imperfection, and that observation rewarded patience and attention. A gentle breeze stirred the ruins, rustling leaves and carrying faint scents of wild herbs and olive groves. It shifted across the stone surfaces, highlighting small features, a hidden carving, a tiny blossom emerging from a crevice, or a shadow stretching across a courtyard. Travelers paused, allowing themselves to sense the nuances the air revealed. The ruins demanded quiet attention, teaching that presence itself was a form of learning, and that observation could uncover meaning hidden to the casual glance. Wildlife animated the temples in subtle ways. Birds nested within column hollows, bees hovered over the flowers sprouting between stones, and small mammals scurried through shaded corners. Observers realized that the ruins were living ecosystems, not static relics. Human history and natural life intertwined, and the interaction between the two emphasized resilience and coexistence. Travelers learned that the temples offered lessons not only in architecture and art, but also in observing life, its delicate balance and enduring rhythms. Columns, fractured yet dignified, remained silent teachers. Travelers tilted their heads skyward, tracing the lines and carvings that sunlight illuminated. Even broken edges communicated lessons of balance, endurance, and meticulous craftsmanship. Observers reflected on the effort, skill, and devotion required to construct these spaces, appreciating the way human artistry could endure the passage of centuries while still inspiring awe. The temples taught that true permanence was achieved not through perfection, but through careful attention to structure, proportion, and patience. Hidden alcoves offered glimpses into the spiritual and ritualistic lives of the past. Faded inscriptions, small reliefs, and traces of offerings hinted at the ceremonies performed long ago. Travelers imagined priests moving through the space with reverence, worshippers placing tokens, and quiet meditation filling the temples. Even the smallest fragment invited reflection, demonstrating that meaning often resides in subtlety. Observation became a bridge across time, connecting the present with the lives and intentions of those who once walked these sacred halls. Water features, though largely dry now, reflected the ingenuity of ancient design. Channels, basins, and cisterns integrated practical needs with spiritual significance. Travelers pictured rituals of cleansing or offerings performed centuries earlier, appreciating the care necessary to maintain such systems. Even in their present decayed state, these features offered lessons in balance, mindfulness, and the thoughtful integration of daily life with spiritual practice, demonstrating that devotion extended beyond ceremony into practical, attentive care of the environment. The changing seasons brought continual transformation to the ruins. Spring renewed color and growth. Summer emphasized endurance under bright sunlight. Autumn softened edges with golden leaves, and winter introduced frost and snow, teaching resilience and patience. Travelers noticed that each season offered new insights, highlighting the dynamic relationship between permanence and change, and between human creation and natural processes. The temples taught that mindful presence could uncover beauty and insight across every condition. Local legends and folklore enriched the experience of the temples. Villagers spoke of lights appearing at dusk, dreams inspired by wandering among the ruins, or whispers carried on the wind. Travelers often noticed subtle phenomena reflecting these stories. Shadows forming unexpectedly, small breezes moving leaves in patterns, or fleeting warmth near stone surfaces. Whether coincidence or lingering presence, these occurrences deepened awe and reverence, suggesting that the temples engaged with the observant in subtle yet profound ways. Artists continued to find inspiration within the temples. Painters captured fleeting patterns of light and shadow. Sculptors studied broken columns for proportion, and poets reflected on the interplay of silence, stone, and time. While no single creation could fully encapsulate the essence of the ruins, each work contributed to an ongoing dialogue across generations. Travelers left sketches, journals, or reflections, adding layers to the collective memory maintained by the stones, acknowledging the ongoing vitality and presence of the temples. Nightfall brought transformation. Moonlight cast silvery highlights across marble surfaces, elongating shadows and revealing details invisible by day. Owls called softly, insects whispered, and small mammals moved unseen beneath the ruins. Stars appeared overhead, mirrored faintly in the smooth surfaces of columns and steps. The gentle night wind stirred leaves and alcoves, creating a symphony of motion and sound. Travelers lingering into the night sensed centuries layered in silence, perceiving the subtle dialogue between stone, nature, and human memory. Frequent visits revealed new dimensions. Changing light, seasonal shifts, and minor environmental variations offered fresh perspectives on familiar features. A previously unnoticed carving, a tiny blossom, or an unexpected sound reminded travelers that careful observation yielded rewards. The temples taught that attentiveness and mindfulness allowed visitors to engage fully, revealing lessons in perception, continuity, and reverence that extended beyond the physical ruins. Paths connecting the temples to surrounding landscapes carried significance. Formed by centuries of footsteps, erosion, and careful alignment with natural contours, these paths guided travelers in mindful motion. Every slope, bend, and texture invited careful attention. Walking became contemplative, emphasizing the journey as much as the destination. Observation of these paths reinforced awareness of the interplay between human presence, landscape, and enduring stone, teaching that even travel could be an act of reflection and insight. Even fragments of the temples held profound lessons. Broken columns, worn steps, and fractured statues reflected centuries of exposure, human contact, and natural evolution. Travelers noticed patterns in light and shadow, cracks guiding plant growth, and curves revealing design principles. These fragments demonstrated that beauty and meaning persisted even in incompleteness, reinforcing lessons of resilience, continuity, and the importance of careful observation. The teachings of the temples extended into life beyond observation. Travelers applied insights in their daily routines. Patience, careful listening, and mindful attention became natural extensions of experience. The interplay of light, shadow, stone, nature, and imagination provided subtle guidance, modeling awareness, engagement, and reverence that could be applied in other areas of life. Thus, the sleeping temples of Greece endured, patient, profound, and timeless. Column after column, shadow after shadow, bloom after bloom, they carried artistry, memory, and quiet vitality. Travelers, scholars, poets, and villagers contributed to the ongoing dream, layering observation, reflection, and reverence upon the enduring stones. The temples required nothing yet offered insight, calm, and connection across centuries. If you have wandered this far through the temples, carry the lessons of patience, mindful observation, and quiet presence with you. And if this exploration of the enduring, whispering stones has inspired you, remember to like and subscribe, so others may follow along and experience the timeless beauty and lessons of shadow, stone, and memory. Morning light touched the ruins with gentle clarity, revealing delicate textures and subtle patterns carved into stone over centuries. Travelers moving along worn paths observed faint traces of color and intricate grooves, each telling stories of devotion and skillful craftsmanship. Even the fractured stones conveyed quiet dignity, demonstrating that imperfection did not diminish significance. Observation rewarded those willing to move slowly, with patience and careful attention to detail, allowing meaning to unfold naturally. A soft wind stirred the ruins, rustling leaves and carrying scents of wild herbs, pine, and distant olive groves. It highlighted features easily overlooked: a hidden alcove, a carved relief, or a tiny flower emerging from a stone crack. Travelers paused, letting the air guide perception, learning that careful observation required both attention and receptivity. The ruins emphasized that presence itself, quiet, deliberate, mindful, was a lesson in endurance and appreciation. Wildlife brought the temples to life in subtle ways. Birds nested within hollowed columns, bees hovered over blossoms in cracks, and small mammals moved quietly through shaded areas. Travelers realized that the ruins were not static. They were living ecosystems where human history and nature coexisted. Awareness of this balance reinforced lessons in patience, coexistence, and the enduring rhythm of life, showing that observation could reveal deeper truths about resilience and interconnection. Columns, weathered and broken, retained authority and elegance. Travelers tilted their heads upward, tracing lines and carvings highlighted by sunlight. Even chipped edges and fractured surfaces communicated lessons in balance, resilience, and craftsmanship. Observers reflected on the patience and skill required to construct these sacred spaces, recognizing that enduring beauty depended on careful planning, attention to proportion, and meticulous execution. The temples taught that permanence and artistry were achieved through thoughtful effort over time. Hidden alcoves revealed traces of ancient ritual. Faded inscriptions, fragmented reliefs, and remnants of offerings suggested the spiritual practices of centuries past. Travelers imagined priests moving with reverence, worshippers placing offerings, and quiet contemplation filling the spaces. Even the smallest fragment invited reflection, showing that meaning often resides in subtle details. The temples connected visitors across time, bridging centuries and providing insight into human devotion and mindfulness. Water systems, though largely dry, reflected ingenious design. Channels, basins, and cisterns integrated practical and spiritual needs. Travelers considered rituals of cleansing or offering that once took place and appreciated the care necessary to maintain these features. Even in decay, these systems provided lessons in balance, foresight, and integration of practical and spiritual life, illustrating that devotion extended into everyday actions and environmental stewardship. Seasonal changes transformed the experience of the ruins. Spring brought renewal and vibrant greenery. Summer emphasized endurance under bright sunlight, autumn softened edges with golden leaves, and winter introduced frost and snow, emphasizing resilience and patience. Travelers noticed that each season provided unique insight, highlighting the dynamic relationship between human creation and natural processes. The temples taught that mindful observation revealed subtle beauty throughout the cycles of time. Local legends and folklore deepened the sense of wonder. Villagers spoke of mysterious lights at dusk, dreams inspired by wandering through ruins, and faint whispers carried on the wind. Travelers often noticed subtle phenomena reflecting these tales. A shadow shifting unexpectedly, leaves moving in a curious pattern, or a fleeting warmth near stone surfaces. Whether coincidental or subtle presence, these moments amplified reverence, suggesting the temples responded to attention and mindfulness in ways beyond immediate perception. Artists continued to seek inspiration. Painters captured transient patterns of light and shadow. Sculptors studied fractured columns for proportion and form, and poets reflected on the interplay of silence, stone, and time. No creation could fully capture the essence of the ruins, yet each contributed to a dialogue spanning generations. Travelers also left sketches, reflections, and journals, adding layers to the collective memory maintained by the stones. Each gesture acknowledged the ongoing vitality of the temples and their enduring lessons. Nightfall brought profound transformation. Moonlight cast silver highlights across surfaces, elongating shadows and revealing previously hidden details. Owls called softly, insects whispered, and small mammals moved discreetly beneath the ruins. Stars shimmered overhead, mirrored faintly in smooth marble surfaces. Gentle breezes stirred leaves and alcoves, creating a subtle symphony of movement and sound. Travelers lingering at night sensed centuries layered in silence, perceiving the ongoing dialogue between stone, nature, and human memory. Frequent visits offered fresh perspectives. Changing light, subtle seasonal shifts, and minor environmental variations revealed details previously unnoticed. A faint carving, a tiny bloom, or an acoustic quirk might emerge, showing that careful attention yielded rewards. Travelers learned that the temples provided continual instruction for those willing to engage deeply, teaching lessons in perception, patience, and reverence that extended beyond the physical space. Paths connecting the temples to surrounding landscapes carried significance of their own. Worn by centuries of footsteps, shaped by erosion, and aligned with natural features, they guided travelers in mindful movement. Every bend, contour, and texture underfoot invited deliberate observation. Walking became a form of meditation, emphasizing the journey as much as the destination. Awareness of the path reinforced understanding of the interplay between human presence, landscape, and enduring stone, showing that even travel could teach attentiveness and reflection. Even fragments of the ruins retained meaning. Broken columns, fractured statues, and worn steps reflected centuries of exposure, human interaction, and natural forces. Travelers noticed patterns, light highlighting edges, shadows creating new forms, cracks guiding plant growth. These fragments demonstrated that beauty, insight, and instruction persisted even in incompleteness. Reflection on these details emphasized lessons of resilience, continuity, and the value of careful, attentive observation. The teachings of the temples extended into everyday life. Travelers incorporated lessons of patience, careful listening, and mindful attention into routines beyond the ruins. The interplay of light, shadow, stone, nature, and imagination provided subtle guidance, modeling engagement, awareness, and reverence that could be applied in broader contexts. Thus, the sleeping temples of Greece endured, timeless, patient, and profound. Column after column, shadow after shadow, bloom after bloom, they carried artistry, memory, and quiet vitality. Travelers, poets, scholars, and villagers contributed to the ongoing dream, layering reflection, observation, and reverence upon the enduring stones. The temples required nothing yet offered insight, calm, and connection across centuries. If you have wandered this far through their stones, carry the lessons of patience, observation, and mindful presence with you. And if this journey into the whispers of shadow, stone, and memory has inspired you, Don't forget to like and subscribe so others may wander alongside us through the enduring beauty of Greece's sleeping temples.